Welcome in. It is the Kevin Sheehan Show. Toby Altizer sitting in for Kevin today on the Team 980. Kevin will be back tomorrow. Got plenty to dive into today. Want to talk about the Caleb Downs report that came out last night. We'll get into that in just a couple of moments. Also want to talk about Jeremiah Love. Seems like everybody's over the moon for this guy. I think he's the best player in the draft. I think he's a tier one guy with Caleb Downs. So we're going to spend the whole first hour talking about those two tier one guys. But I do think we have to pump the brakes a little bit on the Jeremiah Love hype train. We'll talk about that coming up in a little bit. I've seen on social media a lot of people talking about Adam Peters and the Marshawn Lattimore deal after he was released yesterday. Some people are giving him a little bit of a pass. I think that's a little bit crazy. We'll talk about that coming up at 11. Ryan Fowler of Fanside, are going to join us at noon. Want to get his thoughts on the draft and what he saw at the combine, and if his thoughts on who Washington should be targeting with the 7th overall pick should be changing at all. I think it's interesting to see some of the stuff that comes out of the combine, just to see some of the various reports, some of the various things that come out of Indianapolis, because you get a lot of news, you get a lot of intel, you get a lot that adds to the conversation once you get out of Indianapolis after the combine. Now we're kind of fully into draft season, trying to figure out what's going to happen. Free agency is just about to get in full swing next week, and then you'll have a better idea of where the roster's at going into the NFL draft. But the guy at the top of my board, basically this entire draft process, even before we saw any of the 40s in Indianapolis, even before we saw some of the different stuff after the season had finished up, my top guy all along has been Caleb Downs. I'm a big fan of his game, big fan of what he can bring to a defense, big fan of how smart he is as a football player. And I think when you look at what he's able to do, it kind of fits perfectly with where Washington wants to go with their defensive side of the football this year. You bring in a guy like Durante Jones, and the number one, number two, the top two things that stand out to me and what you need specifically on the back end for defenders in that type of scheme is versatility and smarts, IQ. And I think Caleb Downs personifies those two things exactly. He's very versatile. You can use him all over the football field. I think sometimes we run into this issue where everything has to be a comp. And a lot of times the reason you do these comps is just to give people idea. You know, not everybody can turn on the tape, right? Not everybody can sit there. I know you've got a 9-to-5 job. You're not going to have tons of time to go home and be like, hey, watch the tape, grind the Caleb Downs tape. You don't have the time to do that all the time. Now, maybe you watch some highlights and different things, but you're not necessarily always spending resources to try to seek out the Ohio State game film and all those sorts of things. So I'm not going to fault people on these sorts of things, but I think some of the comps that get thrown around, which again are just to give people an idea of the kind of player that he is, I think they don't fully fit. If you throw around Nick Emanwari, I think you're doing Caleb Downs and Emanwari a disservice, because they're two different types of football players, even though they can do some things similarly. If you try to throw around Kyle Hamilton, same thing. You're discrediting a little bit how unique of athletes Kyle Hamilton and Nick Emanwari are when you just look at the size of those guys. So if we just take Nick Emanwari last year and what he weighed in at, he's 6'3", 220. You look at Kyle Hamilton and his size, he's listed at 6'4", 218. And then you look at Caleb Downs, and he's not anywhere close to that. 6 foot, 206. It's a different player than 6'4", 218 and 6'3", 220. Different type of guy. So I think you're doing a disservice to the freak athletes that Kyle Hamilton and Nick Emanwari are when you try to compare Caleb Downs to them. But I also think you're looking at a different football player in terms of ability. Caleb Downs can do some of the stuff that Kyle Hamilton and that Nick Emanwari can do, where they can play in that slot, the new role that's kind of sexy in the NFL that a lot of people are looking for, and especially after what Emanwari did with the Seattle Seahawks this year in his rookie season, how Mike McDonald and his scheme kind of unlocked him, basically playing him as that nickel corner, allowing his size to be able to be a pseudo linebacker, safety, corner all in one, allowing them to essentially play with 5 DBs at all times. Nick and even Warry being the fifth one. And so if they have to play the run, they're never going to switch out of it because he's essentially their third linebacker, and they can allow it to be their base of sorts, and they can still play the run while still being able to cover the pass, understanding that they probably can't play man-to-man. So that's why you saw Seattle play a lot of zone this year. So you're trying to see a little bit more of that. And Eamon Warry is a freak athlete. He can't cover slot receivers one-on-one. That's not what you're going to ask him to do. You're going to try to put him in opportune spots. Kyle Hamilton, similar type of thing. He's very versatile as a safety. Remember, he was someone that Washington was reportedly targeting or could have been interested in, and I think a lot of fans wanted them to take him when Washington ultimately traded down. But the main knock on him was his speed. I believe he ran like a 4.57 or something like that, 4.59, something in that range. But he's such a smart football player. But his size is really unique. I mean, you see it when he's able to come down and play inside the box, which he does a lot. He's a difference maker. He's just a really, really good football player. You know, I think even a guy like a Derwin James, I think they're just throwing out some of the top safeties when you throw out guys that Caleb Downs is comp to. I don't necessarily think he is that kind of a guy because, again, the size difference, 6'2", 206 to 6'4", 218 is a significant difference, specifically for football players in that back end. I actually think that if you're looking at it, Caleb Downs probably moves better than Kyle Hamilton, doesn't have the same size. Maybe he is a little more agile than Nick Eamon-Warry, but maybe doesn't have the speed of Eamon-Warry. So it's, again, we're arguing about comps here. I think the big thing when you talk about Caleb Downs is he's versatile. So the reason he gets those comps is he can be used in that similar type of role as a nickel corner, and he's willing to play the run, get his nose dirty getting inside. I think he can play as a deep safety. If you want him to play deep middle, deep half, he can do all those things. If you want him to play down more in the box as a dime linebacker type or something of that nature, he can do that. So he's very versatile. He can do a little bit of everything. And I think in terms of football IQ, maybe with the exception of Fernando Mendoza, just because he's a quarterback, he's probably the smartest guy in the draft in terms of football IQ. So if you put those all together, that's why he's at the top of my board. I think he fits it perfectly with what they want to do. I think he allows them to play this multiple style front with guys lining up across the line of scrimmage, some of them dropping, some of them coming, not really understanding what they're going to do on each and every play, and it creates confusion for the quarterback. But I think with that type of a scheme, you need a smart secondary because you've got to understand, all right, I've got to get back to this spot. Here's my pressure points. Here's where I'm at the biggest disadvantage, because that's the nature of playing that style of a defense. As you're trying to confuse the quarterback, well, you have to confuse the quarterback by essentially putting your guys out of position because you're showing them something that they're not going to get and then showing them something different post-snap. So that means you're naturally going to be a little bit out of position. So for him to be able to understand what you're trying to do, these different types of coverages, that's why I think you'll see, we heard from John Keim today that they're probably going to be aggressive in the cornerback market. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think the back end of this defense requires a lot more communication and smarts and IQ and football understanding than the front end of this defense does. Because at the end of the day, generally, you know, if you're a Frankie Louvu type, you're either blitzing or you're dropping into coverage in the flat, or you're doing your traditional linebacker sort of things. And defensive lineman is pretty straightforward as well, it feels like to me. Versus DBs, you could be asked to do a number of different things. And so you have to have some smarts there. So that's why I really like Caleb Downs. We got a report last night from @fake Corey Kinnan. He's a member of the Pro Football Writers Association, I believe. I don't know how much stock I put into this. He put out an article about Caleb Downs. And again, I'm not 100% sure where he's getting some of this stuff from. But he put it out on, I believe, his Substack, that there's an injury with Caleb Downs. And the way he described it was a partially torn meniscus and a degenerative ACL. I don't know how much I buy this, because sometimes you get these sorts of situations, specifically coming out of Indianapolis, where if someone wants someone to drop down the board, here comes a major concern, right? Like, would this shock you at all if Cincinnati, who's sitting at pick number 10, found out a little bit of intel that really doesn't worry them that much, but sounds like a red flag to a lot of people, starts leaking this stuff or starts giving this stuff out to people because they think that he could be gone before the 10th pick and they really, really want him. Maybe. Maybe this really is something. I just don't know what to make of it. And I'm curious if you want to hop in 301-230-0980. I'm still trying to figure out whether I fully believe all of this. Plenty of people have now ran with this and talked about it. So I don't know whether it's true or not. But do you buy this? And two, if this is true, partially torn meniscus, degenerative ACL, whatever the heck that means, does that take him off your board? Because for me, it makes you think about it a little bit. Because if this is true, one of the things when you're drafting this high is you cannot miss. You just can't. Especially when you're in a position like Washington is, where you're picking inside the top 10 and you don't have a second round pick. So you're on an island of sorts that you have to hit on this pick because this is going to be your big time impact player. You have to be able to get an impact player at this spot in the draft. Or you're not going to have another option for quite some time. You're not going to have a pick again for a long, long time. So you have to make sure that you nail this pick. So when you're going with a position that isn't a premium position, which safety is not, running back is not, linebacker is not, and I think you could argue that where a lot of fans are right now, those three positions might be at the top of everybody's list, are pretty close to it. Because maybe you want David Bailey, maybe you want Arvell Reese or one of those guys, or Ruben Bain, and they fit in the traditional, okay, that's a impact player at a premier position. So those guys fit the traditional mold of a top 10 pick. Running back does not, even though there's exceptions to the rule, obviously. We saw some last year. We've seen it in the past. Linebacker, off-ball linebacker does not at this point. And safety definitely does not. So when you throw in the fact that Caleb Downs is a safety and you're already, quote-unquote, gambling a little bit by taking him inside the top 10 if you wanted to take him, and you throw on the fact that he might have an injury concern, I can see some people looking at that and saying, let's take him off the board. Let's not gamble here. This is already, quote unquote, a reach or something. I don't think it is in this draft because this draft is unique, and it's why I can understand the Jeremiah love a little bit more, because generally in a draft, the guys that get pushed up the board are at the premier positions of quarterback, offensive tackle, edge rusher, and occasionally cornerback. But this year, there isn't an offensive tackle that people are thrilled about, because even though one probably goes before Washington's pick at number 7, looking like it might be either Spencer Fano out of Utah or Francis Maui-Noa, the right tackle out of Miami. Even if one of those guys go, there's questions whether Maui-Noa can stay at tackle, and he might have to kick inside the guard. And Fano had shorter arms than people were liking. So it's not like there's a tackle like Joe Alt a couple of years ago where people are falling all over themselves to try and get a guy like that. And even there were questions about Joe Alt at times. But there's not a, oh man, we got to get this offensive tackle. At edge rusher, I think people are intrigued by Arvell Reese and his raw physicality and what he can do, and the idea that they can develop him more as a pass rusher. He's not Myles Garrett. David Bailey, I think people are intrigued by his ability as a speed rusher. I think they like what he can do. They question whether he can be an effective run stopper or not, but he's not Von Miller. Ruben Bain, what is he? Is he an edge rusher with the shorter arms, or is he someone you're going to have to kick inside? Is he a bowling ball, or is he someone that is just not going to be able to be as effective in the league because of his physical limitations? So there are questions there. So even all the top edge rushers have questions. And then a quarterback, Washington's obviously not interested there, but even so, there's a one quarterback class here with Fernando Mendoza, maybe two if someone wants to take a gamble on Ty Simpson, but that's exactly what it is a gamble. And Mendoza's going 1 to the Raiders. After that, Simpson could go anywhere from 2 to 3rd round. Like he could go so many different spots. And I think he showed well for himself at the combine. But again, those premium positions for this draft just are not at the top of the board. You look at the top, to me, the top 2 players in this draft are Caleb Downs and Jeremiah Love. That's a running back and a safety. That's not premier position. Sonny Styles is right there. That's not a premier position. I've seen people even comping or mock drafts having Mansour Delane inside of the top 10. I like Mansour Delane. I'm wearing Hokies gear today. He's a former Hokie, played with LSU last year. But even Mansour Delane wouldn't be your traditional stud cornerback that you'd love to spend a top 10 pick on. There's questions about his athletic ability. So it's just a different draft. Not to say that you can't get good players, and not to say there won't be impact players at the top, but I think there are way better depth pieces in this draft than necessarily stud players at the top. So when you look at that, and now you consider, okay, maybe we just go with best player available, which means we're going to go with a non-premium position, which does bring in extra criticism if this guy doesn't pan out. Well, if there's health concerns with a guy like a Caleb Downs, where supposedly he's got a knee injury of sorts, where there might have been a previous injury that was never repaired with an ACL or something of that nature, and he's got a partially torn meniscus, do you just want to take him off your board where you're at 7? Maybe you'd still say if you're at 12 and you're like, screw it, let's just take the best player available if he's there. But do you consider, okay, we're at 7, we could probably just take, say, David Bailey's available? Like, I was just going through an exercise the other day of how I think that a mock draft at the top could go. And I think the way that I was seeing it and just thinking about it, there's a chance that you're deciding between David Bailey, Reuben Bain, and Caleb Downs still. Do you just say in that scenario, not worth the risk, even though maybe we have this guy as a blue chip talent and these other guys as they're green, they're good, but they're not blue chip. Like, I'm not 100% sold this guy's going to be it. Do you just take one of those guys because they're at the more premium position and maybe there's less question marks physically because of that? Because that's what I think is interesting about this report is for a guy at a non-premium position to have a medical red flag of sorts, because really the only red flags for Caleb Downs coming into this process would have been, does he have enough speed? Is he going to be big enough? Those sorts of physical questions versus medical questions. Like, if you're just questioning whether he's big enough and can do it at the NFL level the same way, well, I watched him at the Big Ten in Big Ten games be really, really good and play just fine and physical against really good football teams. So that stuff doesn't worry me. But does introducing this element of saying, well, maybe you're going to have to worry about something that's going to linger. Me personally, I still need to see a little bit more of a verified report on this. And who knows, maybe we won't. Maybe this is true. I'd love to see a little more verified report of like a Pelissero or a Schefter or something like that. And then I'd probably take it into a little more consideration. Even so, I didn't see issues with him moving around at Ohio State. But you do introduce an element where, well, say this guy in 5-6 years isn't the same guy. Well, if you knew about this and you didn't bother and David Bailey's still getting 8, 9, 10 sacks a year, then you're kind of kicking yourself like, man, we missed that one. And you can't afford to be doing that. So I do understand if some people look at it and say, all right, we've got to move this guy off our board. 301-230-0980 if you'd like to hop in. Do you buy the Caleb Downs report? We haven't gotten it from somebody that you would traditionally say is reputable, although he's got a decent following. People still feel like people have apparently liked this guy's stuff. So I don't know. I've never heard of this guy before. He was at the combine, so it's not like they're just credentialing nobodies. So I would assume that he did maybe actually get some intel. But does this mean that with the quote-unquote degenerative ACL and partially torn meniscus that you would take him off your board? Or do you just continue to go about it as normal and say, you know what, if Caleb Downs is the best player available, at my pick at 7, I'll take Caleb Downs. 301-230-0980. I also want to dive into the discussion about Jeremiah Love, because something that I think has gotten a little out of hand is how good people talk about Jeremiah Love as being. Not that he's not the best player in the draft. I've already clarified that. To me, the two best players in the draft this year, the two guys in the tier 1 of this draft, are Caleb Downs and Jeremiah Love. But I do think that people are getting carried away and forgetting some of the guys that we've seen in previous iterations of the draft that were taken early that are good football players. And if you're looking at it saying, oh, Jeremiah Love, we won't see another guy like this again, I think we need to calm down a little bit. Saying all this, understanding he's the best player in the draft. It's just a little bit of a weaker top end of the draft. So we'll continue talking about Caleb Downs. You want to hop in 301-230-0980. Also want to talk about Jeremiah Love. Where does he rank among running backs we've seen taken in the first round over the last decade or so? We'll give you some of our thoughts on that next. You're listening to the Kevin Sheehan Show. Toby Altizer sitting in on the Team 980.
Pardon me for asking about a specific player, but I'm going to do it anyway. Jeremiah Love's sitting out there, and obviously you've got some, decisions to make on the offensive side of the ball.
Yep.
It's a dynamic running back. You could see what you as a defensive coordinator in this league know how difficult it is to stop. Where are you on the philosophy of taking a running back as high as you're drafting?
Yeah, I think the best thing, man, like, who are the guys that can help impact your team?
Right.
And I think our league has changed a little bit, Rich, over the last few years into that way. When you see guys who can absolutely make impactful plays to do things, that's really what you're looking for.
Right.
How does somebody impact the team in a great way? And sometimes that's through running back. And we've seen, the players over the last, 4 or 5 years who have done that, and they deliver. And so what happens, I like him and him and him. When you get into that spot, there's so many guys that you like, right, and you start putting them into rankings and where do you go? But like I said earlier, Adam and his group, they've got a really good process, man, that they go through. And I'm still learning a lot of the guys now from the college side and just getting done free agency and going through a lot of those evaluations. I'll learn more over the next, few weeks for sure.
As you're still learning, guys, I can tell you one guy that's pretty easy to learn. Watch a couple of Jeremiah Love games, and you'll know how talented and special of a running back he is. We'll talk more about him in just a moment. He is incredibly good. I think there are two guys at the top of this draft that are tier 1 in talent, best football players. It's Jeremiah Love. It's Caleb Downs. Those are the top two, in my opinion. And again, I don't know how much I'm buying the injury report, but I do think that is a point that we have to consider. It's something we just at least have to think about a little bit as it goes on. We'll see if more credible sources start to put that out. That being said, Jordan Reed of ESPN just put out his newest mock draft, which goes round 1 to round 2. And sure enough, he has Washington taking Caleb Downs with the 7th overall pick. So that is something to continue to keep an eye on. But shifting over to Jeremiah Love, he has gotten a lot of love, forgive the pun, recently for a lot of Washington fans. One thing that I think is a really good reminder, something that we need to remind ourselves of, because immediately when you get to the combine and you watch these guys running around doing different things and you see numbers and things that you maybe previously hadn't thought or you had an idea, but you got it confirmed. Sometimes we overweigh these things. For example, everyone knew that Reuben Bain had short arms, and then they saw the measurements come out of the combine, and then, holy crap, he's got that short of arms? It's like, let's not double knock the guy for having short arms. We already knew he had short arms. It just confirmed it. Maybe it was shorter than you thought or whatever, but don't double knock him for the short arms thing. We already knew that. It can go the other side, too, where we already knew Jeremiah Love was fast. I assumed he would run low 4.4s. He ran a 4.36. So maybe he's slightly faster than I thought, but it doesn't significantly change my opinion on Jeremiah Love. I think for some people, they saw him run a 4.36 and said, oh my gosh, we have to take this guy. And it's like, all right, well, we knew he was fast. This shouldn't shock you. This shouldn't immediately change all of your opinions on Jeremiah Love. And again, I'm not down on Jeremiah Love. I think he's the best player in the draft. I think if you were to put a Madden rating on these guys coming out of the NFL draft, he'd be the highest with Caleb Downs. Like, I'm not arguing that he's not a really good football player. So don't get twisted there. But just because he ran a 4.36 doesn't suddenly mean, oh, you have to take him at 7. You still have to consider it is running back. And if there is a draft, in my opinion, that you could justify away taking a running back at pick number 7, it would be this one. Even though I want to talk about where he ranks for running backs over the last 10, 15 years in terms of first-round guys, because I do think we've gotten a little carried away about the way some people are talking about this guy. You got to remember some of the prospects that have come out recently that I still think are better prospects than what Jeremiah Love is, just to put it in perspective. That being said, this is a draft in which I'm going to tell you I wouldn't take Jeremiah Love and I'm going to take a safety. Or I'm going to tell you I wouldn't take Jeremiah Love and I'm going to take a linebacker. So if there's any draft where you're going to go, okay, positional value, whatever, let's just go ahead and take best player available and the top talent in the draft, it'd be this one. So I do understand why a lot of people are on the Jeremiah Love bandwagon. And there's no question that he would immediately improve this offense and he would add a dynamic playmaker to this team. Again, I probably still would not take him. Not to say he's not on my board, but I think the way that I would slot this thing, he's probably 7th or 8th. So unless everything goes wrong and every player that I've wanted ahead of him is gone, I'm probably not taking Jeremiah Love. But he's incredibly talented, and there's no denying that. But I think when you look at where he ranks over the last decade or so, I think when you go through some of these running backs, I just think it's interesting because one thing that I think people fall into is you're just victims of the moment, which is fine. But you also have to look at where these running backs have been the last couple of years, some of the guys that have been successful, some of them that have not. And this idea that Jeremiah Love is generational, which I haven't seen that word thrown around. Credit to people for at least understanding that we got to stop throwing that around. We throw generational on someone every single year, then clearly they're not generational. But I think when you look at where he's been, like we see running backs like Jeremiah Love come out pretty frequently. They're different styles. They don't all look the same. They don't all run the same time. They don't all run a 4.36, but they're different styles of elite running backs that come out all the time, in my opinion. Like if you just go back, I went and looked through grades that were given out according to NFL.com. I believe Lance Zierlein is a really good draft analyst for NFL.com. I believe he's the one that's done all these for quite some time. We'll go back a couple of years. But when you look at some of the guys that have come out in the NFL draft, first-round running backs over the last decade or so, I think Jeremiah Love is one of the top 10 guys there, but I think you could argue he's not a top 5 in the last 10 years or so. And I don't think that's crazy to say. I think the most controversial one, and I think if you want to call in 301-230-0980 and tell me I'm an idiot, feel free. I don't think Jeremiah Love's a better prospect than Ashton Genty was last year. I can understand that size-wise, maybe speed-wise to an extent, that Jeremiah Love is the guy that everybody wants. But I don't think he's a better prospect than Ashton Genty. I think he's a better prospect than the other guys that went in the first round. Omarion Hampton. Travion Henderson didn't go in the first round, but Travion Henderson, I don't think he's a better prospect than him. I love it. First guy in the comments says, "All right, bro, stop talking." I knew somebody was going to get frustrated by this. I'm not the only one that thinks this, by the way. I wanted to get confirmation to realize I wasn't crazy. I know a lot of people are going to think I'm an idiot for saying it. But if you just go off of NFL.com's, again, same guy doing these grades, the grades weren't even close. Jeremiah Love is graded as 6.71, which means he's going to be a good NFL player. Ashton Genty was graded at 7.15. I think people are forgetting how good Ashton Genty was in college. I know he went to Boise State. I know all these things. But I don't think Jeremiah Love's a better prospect than Ashton Genty was coming out. I don't think he's a better prospect than Bijan Robinson was coming out. I definitely don't think he's a better prospect than Saquon Barkley was coming out. I don't think he's a better prospect than Ezekiel Elliott, Christian McCaffrey. This is really going to frustrate some people. And Lance Zierlein, again, I respect his opinion a lot. He had the same grade on him as Travis Etienne, and I think he's very similar. I understand that people are going to think this is ridiculous because you're victims of the moment. You're just watching this guy. Don't forget how good Ashton Genty was. So my thing is, we see guys like this come out pretty frequently. Like to act like you're never going to be able to get another guy like this, I think is a little crazy. Now, maybe you're not going to pick number 7 again. So if that's your rebuttal, that's fine. I can understand that. But I don't think this is something where if you miss out on Jeremiah Love, oh man, you're not going to be able to overcome that. I think you can find a guy in free agency that can help you, not to the extent of Jeremiah Love. Again, I feel like I have to keep reiterating this because people think that I hate Jeremiah Love. I think he's the best player in the draft. I'll keep saying that if I have to remind people. I'm not a Jeremiah Love hater. But I think Genty was a better prospect. I think Bijan Robinson was a better prospect. And that's fine. He's the best for this draft class. But I think we've got to chill out a little bit on how high we talk about this guy. And also, too, some of the guys that have been picked this high, their teams haven't been able to turn it into success. So I think you have to be a little careful there. Now, you look at last year with Ashton Genty in particular, he went to a place with a horrendous O-line. One of the worst I've seen. They couldn't block anybody. So Ashton Genty wasn't going to be able to have success against that behind that O-line. I think immediately if Jeremiah Love gets picked here, he's in a better spot because I think this O-line is better. Get the Tunsil deal done. I would think that Coleman can fit in at left guard if they bring back Chris Paul, and we'll see. We'll figure out what they're going to do at center, whether it's Allegretti, Sam Cosmi, Josh Connerly. I think they've got a better O-line. But I think when you look at it, I just don't know that Jeremiah Love suddenly fixes everything like so many people think he's going to. He's going to open up the offense. But what opens up the offense more? Is it Jeremiah Love and Jag receiver? Or is it, say you were going to go offense, because I'd still prefer to go defense, but say you were going to go wide receiver, Carnell Tate and Rashad White. Not to say Rashad White's anything close to Jeremiah Love, but what's the difference between Jeremiah Love? Let's say he has a great rookie season. What's the difference between Jeremiah Love rushing for 1,400, 1,500 yards and, I don't know, you bring in Rashad. I mean, look, last year, Bill rushed for just over 800 yards, I believe, somewhere around there. Like, if you gave him more carries, and I'm not saying that they're going to be suddenly better in the run game because they give Bill all the carries. But I do think we have to chill out a little bit on the Jeremiah Love stuff. I think you've got to calm down a little bit. I understand that he's good. And maybe you don't really care about historical context because for this particular draft, he's probably the best player. That's fine. I get that. But for me, I still got to take a defender. I'll take Caleb Downs. I'll take Sonny Styles. I'll take Arvell Reese. I'll take David Bailey. If you get behind all those guys and suddenly Ruben Bain's gone and all those top 5 guys defensively are all gone, then okay, maybe you end up in a spot where you go Jeremiah Love. Now, I personally would probably still go receiver over running back at that point. The tough part for me is you have to consider how resources are allocated and looking into the future and how you can also build the team. You know who's going to go for a significant amount of money this year in free agency that I just don't think is all that great of a football player? Juwan Jennings. Juwan Jennings.
Man, did you pick a day to get on this train? Because Kevin got on here yesterday and said Juwan Jennings is his number 1 free agent.
Ugh. I can't with Juwan Jennings. I'm not saying he's a terrible football player, but for the amount that he's going to command,
it's going to be a lot of money.
I can't do it.
Fair.
I cannot do it for Juwan Jennings. So the point being, would I rather, if they were going offense in the NFL draft, would I rather they draft Jeremiah Love and then sign Juwan Jennings? Or would I rather them take Rashad White, if Kenneth Walker hits the market, Kenneth Walker, one of those guys? I would rather that and then draft Carnell Tate and figure it out from there. If you're going offense, I just would much rather that approach. So to me, Juwan Jennings is going to get $20 million versus I can pay a running back that I think can give me 1,000 yards. Look, people are going to hate this. Ready for this? Rico Dowdle. That's a 1,000-yard back. How much is he going to cost?
It's a lot of speed.
I just don't think, like, the way that we look at Jeremiah Love, I think some people have to relax a little bit. Like, look at the guys that have been drafted at the top recently and how their teams have fared. Ashton Genty, their team sucked last year. Bijan Robinson, he's fantastic, probably the best back in the league. They haven't done anything. Breece Hall didn't do anything. Jahmyr Gibbs is kind of an exception because I think their team was built up a little bit better when they drafted him. Kenneth Walker, it took them some time. Travis Etienne, Najee Harris, it didn't work.
He could be available, by the way.
Yeah, so, like, to me, even like Saquon Barkley, he didn't work out with the Giants. He was still a fantastic running back there, but he went somewhere else and it worked.
We know whose fault that was, though.
Yeah, well, exactly. So the point being is the idea of running back is sexy because I can now draft this guy to my fantasy team. And
correct.
Sometimes it's difficult because, and I understand this completely because I'm not going to pretend to be film guru, understands football as well as every football coach in America. But what's easier to understand if they're playing well, Max? A safety when I can barely see him on the screen half the time, or a running back who I see run the ball 20 times? It's a running back. So naturally, you're going to be more attached to that guy. When you're talking about a safety and some of these things, you're more attached to, hey, what does Logan Paulson have to say about what he's doing? Because I can't truly evaluate all these things.
Right.
So I understand that. I just don't think that Jeremiah Love comes in here and fixes everything like so many people think he's going to. Not to say he doesn't make the team better, but I think David Bailey makes the team better. I think Caleb Downs makes the team better. I think Sonny Styles makes the team better. And it's not to say that he's not a really good football player. What do you think? 301-230-0980. If you're on the chat, I see a lot of people frustrated with my take on this. Hop in, 301-230-0980. I'd love to have a discussion. I love Jeremiah Love, but I think we have to chill a little bit on how good of a prospect we talk about him as. I think there are some guys even in recent history, as early as last year, that were better running back prospects coming out of college. 301-230-0980. Toby Altizer sitting in for Kevin Sheehan.
March means March Madness. Double shows you
980. Max, I got a tweet in the break saying, why'd you choose so many hills to die on today? Feel like I'm generally not the I'm not a hot take artist. I wouldn't consider myself. I'm generally pretty even keeled.
'Tis the season.
Apparently today I came with some heat.
Hey man, it's March. We got to start turning it up. We don't have football to keep us safe anymore.
Yeah, I mean, look, I like Jeremiah Love as a prospect a lot. I think when you look at what he was able to do at Notre Dame, it's really impressive. And I think too, while I'm not as big on him as I was Ashton Genty, I do think there are aspects of his game that are probably better than Ashton Genty. Like, I think as a receiver, he probably is a little bit better. I think Genty gets slept on as a receiver out of the backfield. I don't think Boise State used him enough there. And I don't think, frankly, the Raiders had any idea what they were doing. But I think for me, Love is probably a little better in that aspect. You can line him up out wide and he could run routes as a receiver if you want to do that. Pass pro, I'm no expert on that, so I can't tell you whether he's definitively better there or not. I think as a runner, I think Genty is probably a tier and a half higher than Jeremiah Love, even though maybe he doesn't have the long speed or quite the explosiveness, even though he was quite explosive and ran away from guys quite a bit. So I don't know. I think it's just an interesting thing where this year, because of where we're at with this draft class, because of the fact that there are so few guys that people feel really enamored by, like, it's tough because Washington doesn't need a quarterback. And even if they did, you know that a quarterback wasn't falling to 7. So people aren't watching Fernando Mendoza tape. And even if they do, they're not thrilled to watch Fernando Mendoza. They're not wowed by it by any means. Like, he's a really good player, and I'm curious to see how we'll do in the league, but it's not the highlight tape of a Caleb Williams or a Jaden Daniels or a Drake May or one of those kind of guys. So you're not watching the tape going, oh my goodness, this guy's going to be awesome. You're not watching tons of receiver tape, in my opinion. You're not watching, next year we're going to be watching Jeremiah Smith tape like, oh my goodness, if we could get this guy, generational sort of deal. So what do you end up doing? You watch a lot of Jeremiah Love tape because people love playmakers. So of course you're going to watch these kinds of guys. So I think he's a really good football player. I think he's the best player in the draft. I just don't think he fits with where Washington's going right now. I don't think he fits their timeline. I think he'd be good if he played here. So I can understand why people like him. I just think there are other guys I'd rather have than what I would rather have with Jeremiah Love. 301-230-0980. Let's get out to Lap in DC. Lap, what's going on?
Hey, what's up, bro? Good show. I'm in agreement with you with Jeremiah Love. Doc's been selling me for like the last couple of months about Jeremiah Love, man. So it's definitely intriguing. But I want tape, man. I've been saying it. That's who I want. And or Downs. Those are two that I really want. I think you were high on Bailey, though, right? Weren't you high on Bailey?
I do like Bailey a lot.
Okay, yeah, I like them too. I'm not ruling out. I think any of those guys are special, but I just want something different because, especially on the offensive side, because we have so many holes on the defense, and I know if we get a stud defensive player, sure, but we still got a lot. We got a new coach. We got a scheme. I think our strength is our offense, and I don't know where we're going to be with Terry, for the next couple of years. And I want a young receiver to kind of push those young guys and kind of take the pressure off of Terry, but also eventually transition to replace Terry, because I still think we can have a nice young receiver and maybe get a tight end if any of those tight ends we have on the roster is not really good. But we'll see, man. But if we can just protect them, man, and he play his game, and that defense could be decent, man. They don't even got to be like a top 5, top 10 D. I mean, that would be outstanding if it was. But if we could just get a top 20 defense, at least a defense that maybe can force turnovers to give us a chance, I think we'd be all right. But I just think we need to go where our strength is, because it's kind of sad that Dan Quinn is a defensive-minded coach.
Yep.
And most coaches, whatever their strength is, that's how their identity of their team is shaped. But we're not like that. We are offensive team first. So it's just kind of weird.
Yeah, I appreciate the phone call, Lap. Yeah, I think it's a good point. And I think for me, I would still prefer they go defense with the 7th overall pick. I think there's some really good players. So many people coming out of the combine, and when you get to these sorts of deals, it ends up being that we talk about the math doesn't work where There's like 7 guys who are supposedly not going to make it out of the top 5. Like, that doesn't work, right? Sonny Styles, no way he makes it out of the top 5. Jeremiah Love, no way he makes it out of the top 5. Arvell Reese, go through. David Bailey, oh, no way any of these guys make it out of the top 5. And all of a sudden, here's one available at 7 because it just doesn't work that way. That's just not how it works. So I'm very interested to see how this draft falls. I would love to get a Sonny Styles. I would love to get a Caleb Downs. I would love to get a Reese or a Bailey. I still think that you've got to go defense. When you look at, again, if we're just going best player, and this is why off-season moves, it's so tough to put into context, and it's so tough, I think, at times to explain why these things go the way that they do, and it's not necessarily always the correct thing, because we've seen plenty of general managers who are smarter at football than we are make stupider decisions than we probably would make in the same chair, right? So I do understand that. But when you consider how you're allocating resources in terms of money and free agency, how you're signing guys and then drafting them, that's why you don't always just go with the best player on the board, because you got to try to figure out how you're spending the money and saving in various areas and all these different things. That's why an edge rusher or quarterback or one of these types of things can get pushed up the board a little bit more than, say, a running back, because I can sign a running back that is pretty effective for $7 or $8 million versus if I want to get a edge rusher that is reasonably effective that can give me 8-9 sacks, I can't get them for $7 or $8 million likely. It's probably going to have to be somewhere in the 14, 15 or more range. And if that's the case, then which is the better way to allocate the resources? So that's where it all comes down to. And that's why I think this all becomes a very difficult discussion, and why, frankly, these guys get paid the big bucks. That's what they've got to figure out. And that's why when you find a good one who's able to figure out how to manage all this stuff, you're in a really good spot and you have a leg up on everybody else, because even though there's 32 teams and there's 32 general managers, there's not 32 guys that reasonably know how to put all this stuff together. Luckily for Washington, they have figured out the quarterback position, which is the hardest one to figure out. It's difficult to find the quarterback. The issue I think they've run into recently for Adam Peters is they haven't been able to figure out everything else yet. And some of that is they were left with a poor roster, so they've had to make a lot of short-term, older moves to raise the floor. And I think people are frustrated with that, and they're tired of that. So going into this year, how do you get a little bit younger? How do you get a little bit faster? Those are big-time questions. And I think when you look at the defensive side of the football, in order to improve that, you're either going to have to spend significant money, which they're going to have to do regardless, but I think you can get a big-time impact player with that 7th overall pick that can be a cornerstone for a long time for this team. That's where I'm going, is defensively, and that's how I'm going to go with the 7th overall pick in the draft. Want to continue talking about the GM. Want to talk about Adam Peters. Seen a lot of people talking about the Marshawn Lattimore deal after he was released, and you're going to save $18.5 million against the cap. Seen some people saying, all right, AP can get a pass on that. Not so fast. I think you have to be held accountable, and I think there are a couple of reasons why that Lattimore trade, I get hindsight's 2020, but even when the trade was made, I think now looking back, you can see some of that process was flawed. We'll talk about that next. You want to hop in, 301-230-0980. Toby Altizer in for Kevin Sheehan. Kevin Sheehan Show. Toby Altizer in for Kevin today. Yesterday, we got some news that wasn't all that shocking. We were kind of waiting for it to drop this offseason. Marshawn Lattimore going to be released by the Commanders, going to save about $18.5 million in cap space. This just made all the sense in the world. You save $18 million for a player that frankly hasn't been all that good when he's played here. And a lot of people have now been revisiting the trade, which is understandable. And hindsight's always going to be 2020. So you try to take back to where you were and what your thought process was at the time. I think for me at the time before the trade was made, I wasn't necessarily keen on trading for someone at the deadline because I didn't feel like one guy was suddenly going to change the defense. But when they made the trade, you looked at it and you realized it was a risk at the time because you look at the amount that they gave up. But you felt okay with it because if he was able to be Marshawn Lattimore, then you looked at it and said, okay, this is a dude. This is a guy that can really help you on the outside. And I think we forget a little bit because we watched this past season with how bad the defense was. And you think, oh, okay, it was a lot better. It really wasn't that much better. I mean, it played at a acceptable level, and the offense played at such an elite level that they led them to an NFC championship game. The offense was the one that did that. I think if he was at his best, then it could have really improved that defense because they needed a guy on the outside to lock things down, but he was never that guy. So to me, some people look at it and go, okay, well, he deserves to pass, talking about Adam Peters, for the trade that he made, which was giving up a 3rd rounder, a 4th rounder, and a 6th rounder for Marshawn Lattimore and a 5th round pick. And the tough part for me is you don't get a pass because to me, you look at that and I understand at the time you wanted to improve the team where you were at. You wanted to kind of push the chips in a little bit, but now you end up in a spot too, where you don't have as many draft picks. And I understand that those draft picks were in last year's draft versus this year's draft, but you were missing out on draft picks, and it's such a difficult spot to be in because now you've made a trade for Tunsil, and so for a second straight year, even though I really like the Tunsil deal, and I don't mind that at all, you end up in a spot where this roster is in shambles in a lot of ways, and they just don't have the assets to be able to bring in young talent to fill it. So for the Lattimore deal, for me, the tough part about this is the reason I can't just immediately go, okay, AP gets a pass. It's totally fine. The reason why I have a tough time with it, Max, they traded for a guy who was injured when they traded for him, who then was injured longer than you expected him to be injured when you first acquired him, who then played poorly down the stretch of the season, and they blamed it on an injury, who then came back and frankly wasn't much better when he was healthy and then got hurt again. You can't cry, oh man, if he wasn't hurt or anything of that nature and it was just injuries. You traded for a guy who was injured. Like you don't get a pass for that. When you trade for a guy with a major red flag and then that red flag is waving right in your face, you don't get a pass for that. And I think that's the tough part about this deal. I can understand the logic of it. I can understand what they were trying to do. I can understand where they were trying to go. I don't get what exactly. I don't get how you can just give this guy a pass for trading for an injured player. And then he's suddenly even when he played poorly, it was blamed on an injury. You don't get a pass for that. You have to be accountable for the decisions that you make. And so this is one of the things in a larger picture to me that makes you just wonder about where Adam Peters is and what your confidence level is and how you feel about him. You want to hop in 301-230-0980? Because to me, I get what happened. I understand why you got to the point that you did. Even if I didn't agree, to me, when a general manager, when a team executive is leading a thing, when they make a move, when they do something, if I can see the vision and understand where they're trying to go, even if I don't agree with it, I can at least, okay, I'll follow along and then we can have a discussion afterwards, but I can at least see your process. So for me on this one, with Adam Peters, there have been a couple of times where I didn't see his process. I didn't fully understand what he was trying to do. And you get to a point where you didn't like it. And then it's like, I don't understand where you're going here. and there's a little more frustration. This one, I understand where you were trying to go. I understand what you were trying to do. But it also still doesn't give you a pass. It doesn't mean, okay, no big deal. It's all good. No worries. You get a pass for that one. I get that you wanted to improve the defense as you were hoping to go on a playoff run. But I do think some of it, too, is you have to consider this team hasn't evaluated some of the guys that they have brought in well enough to understand where they're best suited. Think about Marshawn Lattimore. What is he? He's an outside corner. They had another outside corner. And so you had to try to decide, where does Mikey Sainristil fit in? Well, Mikey Sainristil would likely go back inside if you have two outside corners. And we've watched Mikey Sainristil play in his 2 seasons in the NFL, and he's played significantly better on the outside. So you misjudged where he was best going to be available and best going to be used. And I thought he played really, really well as he went outside and played in the second half of his rookie season. But then you drafted Trey Amos, and you were going to use him with Marshawn Lattimore. That's 2 outside corners. So then you're going to have to kick Mikey back inside. And Mikey struggled there once again. So I think I think just about everybody thought that Mikey was going to be an inside slot corner when he was being drafted. I'm not just talking about this team. I'm thinking about just about everybody in the league was feeling that's kind of where he was. And that's kind of exactly the role that he would fit perfectly into. So it's not something that Washington was alone in this sort of evaluation, but you misjudged it. So you brought in an outside corner who then blocked one of your young guys from being able to play in his better spot. I just think for Marshawn Lattimore, you're not able to acquire a guy like Marshawn of that caliber or of that reputation unless there is something major going on. Generally, especially at a trade deadline. You're just not. A guy that's under contract, it's one thing if you were able to get Marshawn and he was on a expiring contract. He wasn't. He had a couple more seasons. They could have had him under contract for this year too. So you realistically could have gotten 2.5 years for Marshawn Lattimore without having to give up a first or a second. And that was the allure of it. That was the allure of this sort of a trade. But you also have to ask yourself, why the heck, and I understand the Saints aren't very good, but why the heck has New Orleans given up a guy like this for no first round or second round draft picks if there aren't major red flags? And there were. Unfortunately, the red flags were he's not very good anymore and he's always hurt. And we already knew the always hurt part. We already knew the injury part. So that shouldn't have been shocking. It was a little shocking how poor he played when he was on the field. And you felt, okay, maybe you see a better version of him this season after his first season here. He was injured and then came back and played really only well in that New Orleans game, which frankly, Max and I probably could have suited up for receiver for the Saints that game. They had nobody in that game. I mean, the guys catching passes that day were just horrendous. Quarterback play wasn't much better. So I'm glad he played well in that game. But you just don't get a pass for that. And I wonder how people feel today about what is your confidence level on Adam Peters? 301-230-0980. Because to me, it's not that I don't have confidence in Adam Peters. I still think that he can get it done. But you start to wonder a little bit. Tyler Biadasz, you just move off of him. I'm not arguing that he's a fantastic football player, but he was fine. And maybe you're saying, okay, we're going to go with another fine football player and Nick Allegretti there, and you save a little bit of cash. But it's really not that much cash. It's like $2 million, which for me and you, I wish I could say just $2 million. I would take $2 million in my bank account. But in reality of a NFL salary cap, that's not that big of a deal. Like realistically, when you're thinking about, okay, we saved $2 million, who do you sign for $2 million that impacts his football team? I mean, seriously, it's not like $2 million for an NFL team looking at the salary cap makes that big of a difference in the grand scheme of things. So we'll see how that plays out. I continue to go back to that 2024 draft, and I'd argue that the Marshawn Lattimore trade for a lot of people is the worst move by Adam Peters. I'd argue that the worst move by Adam Peters has been he had 6 picks inside the top 100. and only 2 of those guys would be considered starters going into this season, and only one of those would be considered an impact starter, I guess we could have to see. Maybe you could have 3 if Brandon Coleman plays left guard. But Jaden Daniels is a home run, so you get off the hook a lot by the fact that you got the quarterback correct. So you feel good about that. Then after that, Johnny Newton. How do you feel about Johnny Newton going into year 3? You don't feel great. There's a reason why you got rid of Jonathan Allen, thinking that, okay, maybe you free up some space for him to play more, and then you bring in Javon Kinlaw, and then I would have thought that they would have gone the same approach with Deron Payne that they went with Jonathan Allen, saying, all right, we'll move off and save some money, and it doesn't sound like they're going to do that. They're going to keep Deron Payne. So there's a reason why they're going to roll again with Payne and Kinlaw, and Newton is the first guy to rotate in there. It's because Newton hasn't stepped up. I think this decision's a lot easier. If Newton is who they thought Newton was when they drafted him, I think they have no question of what they're going to do with Deron Payne. He would not be wearing burgundy and gold. You save a lot of money. So they didn't hit there. Ben Sinnott is an okay tight end. He's never going to live up to his draft status, but can you at least get something out of him? And I can't draft just a blocking tight end in the second round. I think he's actually decent in the John Bates type of role. Problem is you have John Bates. So you have 2 of the same kind of tight end who doesn't catch the football a lot, good blockers, but doesn't give you a whole lot in the passing game. With the modern NFL, I need a little bit more from my tight end as a receiver. And frankly, from Ben Sinnott, a lot more. Mikey Sainristil, however you want to feel about him, he's at least shown that he can play in this league. Can he be an impact corner? We've seen him do that for a little while. We've also seen him be a liability. So it's trying to figure out how you can get him to play more like he did the second half of his rookie season. But I still have hope for Mikey. And then you get to the other guys, and Brandon Coleman, I still think he's one of their 5 best linemen. I think you've got to find a way to get him on the football field. I think left guard opens up for him. I'm hoping he gets a real chance there because I think he can be good there. So, okay, Brandon Coleman will get on the field, and hopefully he's impactful, and that can be something that really helps you out. And then Luke McCaffrey, we'll see what he becomes. He became serviceable as a wide receiver and was able to make some plays when they were there for him to be made this past season before he got hurt. So credit to him in developing into that sort of a role, but I don't know that he's ever an impact guy, and that's a top 100 pick. So to me, that's the biggest issue that Adam Peters has had, and a big reason, frankly, why they are where they are. I know it's putting a lot of pressure on a guy, but that's what you get when you take that role. And for them to only seemingly hit on 2 of 6 when you have top 100 guys, I get that you're not going to bat 100 and bat 1,000, hit on 100% of your picks, but you've got to hit on more than what they did. Now, luckily, I think he redeemed himself with their 2025 draft class because I like a lot of what they did. But you need to see some of these guys step up and play a little bit better as well. Like Josh Connerly, I like this pick for now, but he's got to show real strides going into next year. I think you saw as the season went on, he got better and better. But if he continues to just be like, oh, okay, I think Josh Connerly in the future is good, at some point you've got to step up and play well. So we'll see if he can continue to develop. I like Josh Connerly. I like what they did there. Trey Amos, I like a lot. We'll see what Jalen Lane can develop into as a wide receiver, but you got an impactful returner. So I like what you did there. Kane Medrano, we didn't see a whole lot of. And Bill, I think, is one of the better values you could find in the draft. A 7th rounder who gave you 800 yards as a rookie. Even if he's just your number 2 or number 3 back going forward, to get a guy like that in the 7th round is great value. So he redeemed himself a little bit. But the issue being, you've now had 2 draft classes. Last year having a shortened number of picks because of the Marshawn Lattimore deal. But you've now had 2 draft classes. And how many of these guys in 2 draft classes would you say are impact players? Not just starters, but impact players. I still think some of these guys have potential to be impact players, but I think you would right now just say it's probably just Jaden Daniels, unless you want to talk special teams in which Jalen Lane is a impactful punt returner. But outside of that, that's a tough spot to be in. How much confidence do you have in Adam Peters, 301-230-0980? When you look at the Lattimore deal and revisit it, again, I can see the process. I can see what he was trying to do. And so I can at least understand that one. Even though it didn't work out in his favor, I can at least somewhat understand it. he doesn't get off the hook because, again, you traded for an injured player who was then injured when he was here and played poorly because of an injury, quote unquote. And then when he came back, he still wasn't very good. So you don't get off the hook for that, but I can at least understand it. But some of the other moves that he's made recently, I don't fully understand. Like, I still don't get the Biotish thing. We'll see if that works out. That's something we're going to have to wait and see. It's one of those that right now I don't love the move. If Allegretti steps in and plays just as well, then it's one of those things. Okay, they saved a few bucks and it was fine and it works out, no problem. But how much confidence do you have in him going into this draft and getting it right at pick number 7, being able to sign the right guys in free agency? Because I do think there's going to be a couple of signings this offseason people are going to be frustrated with because they're going to have to fill out a roster and keep the floor high because they do want to make a playoff run. And I think they're going to sign some guys that would fit in the bucket of older short-term deals that people are going to be frustrated by. I think they have to do some of that. So I'm not going to fault Adam Peters for doing that. But are you able to go target some guys that can be impactful? Last year, their biggest acquisition in free agency was Javon Kinlaw. Javon Kinlaw was not that impactful of a player this year. He had 0 sacks. And I get that that's not necessarily a defensive tackle statistic, but he showed some flashes at times. But for a guy that was my number 1 big-time signing in free agency, I need more than a few flash plays. I need more than a few, okay, I see the vision there. I need a few more than that. So this offseason, when your number 1 asset, the number 1 thing that you can use to improve this football team is cap space, and then it's the number 7 overall pick, and you don't pick in the second round. So really, it's kind of on an island, that 7th overall pick and cap space. How are you going to improve this football team? I think you can, but this free agent class is also interesting in that I don't know that there's top-end talent. And so how are you going to be able to be smart with your money as well? That's what makes being an NFL GM so hard. I could go out and sign Trey Hendrickson, but then what if he's terrible? And I had to sign him to a 3-year deal. What if he's terrible in the final year and I'm paying him $25 million? So I think that's what's going to be interesting this offseason, trying to see how he can figure out value. At some point, too, though, with Jaden just a couple years left before he's going to get a massive payday, I don't know that you can continue to be frugal. And this all goes into, as well, when do they get the Laramie Tunsil thing done? And do they get it done? Do we have to deal with another Terry McLaurin saga, but with Laramie Tunsil? And I can at least understand with the Laramie Tunsil or the Terry McLaurin situation, there were some other sides to this thing saying, all right, this is why you have to be wary. I don't see many red flags getting a Laramie Tunsil deal done. I'd storm right through that door and get it done right now. Now, maybe Laramie's not interested in getting it done right now, but I can tell you this, that thing better get done before training camp kicks off. So what's your confidence level in Adam Peters after what happened yesterday, which we all assume was going to happen, cutting Marshawn Lattimore? But revisiting that and what we've seen now through 2 seasons, getting ready for free agency and another draft, getting ready for that third process through here with Adam Peters. What's your confidence level in him? 301-230-0980. Toby Altizer sitting in for Kevin Sheehan. Kevin Sheehan Show. Toby Altizer in for him today. 301-230-0980 if you'd like to hop in. Coming off the news yesterday that Marshawn Lattimore is going to be released by Washington, saving about $18.5 million. What's your confidence level in Adam Peters? Now, again, we understood that he was going to get moved on from. We got that. But looking back at that trade, looking back at 2 full years, essentially, of him being able to do this, 2 draft classes, 2 free agency classes, being able to build this thing, one time going to an NFC championship, one time basically the opposite of the previous season, going 5-12. Going into year 3, ahead of free agency next week, ahead of the draft in about a month and a half. What's your confidence level in the general manager of the Washington Commanders, Adam Peters? 301-230-0980. Let's go to Mark in Largo. Mark, what's your confidence level?
Oh yeah, I know a lot of people are saying, yeah, the president of the Get Rid of Adam Peters fan club. I was willing to give him a chance until I heard the Beyonce deal last week, and I'm not gonna lie to you. I think everybody, even you, Toby, is still scratching your head to what the hell is that all about. But I think I know what's going on here. And I hate to say it, but I think a lot of people have been saying this, and I'm going to say this until this day. Adam Peters needs to get someone who knows how to negotiate and deal with people, because apparently he does not know how to deal with people. I think he called Tyler's agent and had a friendly conversation, and then it escalated to something else.
Yeah.
And I just think that
I don't know that I buy that, Mark. I don't know that I think it's something.
I tell you what, Toby. You sit up here and say if they don't sign Laramie Tunsil by the training camp, we got a problem. I think if they don't sign him by the end of next month by the draft, we got a problem.
This is going to August. It's not getting resolved quickly. If we know anything about Adam Peters, things don't get resolved that quick.
I mean, but here's the problem I have with this. You can't keep letting stuff like this linger in August, and everybody keeps saying, well, the 49ers do it. And how is that working for them? All the injuries they had. Notice this way. I want you to think about this. The 2 teams that had the most injuries last year have a routinely effort of waiting till the last minute to get things done. The 49ers and the Commanders.
Yeah.
Isn't that telling?
Yeah. No, I appreciate the phone call, Mark. My thing is, the Laramie Tunsil thing is cut and dry. Like the Terry McLaurin thing, I could see both sides, even though I didn't necessarily agree with the Terry's not as good as people make him out to be, or he's not worth the money, or all those things. Even though I wasn't on that side, I could at least see the arguments and understand it. Max, what's the argument against paying Laramie Tunsil? Can you come up with one? If it's the age thing, okay. I've seen Trent Williams continue to play well, 6-7 years older than what Laramie Tunsil is.
And now he's up for a new deal soon.
Yeah. I've seen plenty of tackles play incredibly well into their mid to late 30s. Jason Peters was playing until he was like 40.
Incredible.
Right? So, I can see Laramie Tunsil being just fine. And he's actually the one guy that I don't really care if he needs to load manage, basically, in the NFL and only shows up on Sundays to play. That's like the one guy that I don't care about. As long as you show up on Sunday ready to roll, I'm not as worried about his practice habits as just about everybody else. Like, he's on an island most times, and he does just fine over there. And so I don't mind that trade and everything. But if they don't get a deal done, and we're having to worry about this thing lingering on, I don't get that one. So we'll see where that goes. I don't want to be pre-mad about it, but I wouldn't be surprised if you're correct, Max, and this continues to go and go and go. I don't understand what that tactic would be. The other thing is, with the Laramie Tunsil one, you would think that you'd want to get out ahead of this to get more cap room by being able to get this thing done so that you could lower the cap hit for this year and even have more flexibility. Here's the one thing for me with the Biotish thing, going back to that real quick. If they're just saving money to save money, this isn't baseball or something like that. Spend your cap space. Use it. Like, if you're just saving $2 million just because, then I'm not that impressed. Because, frankly, it's not that much money. $2 million. And maybe they designate it post-June 1. I don't know if they will or not. If they do, they save a little bit more cash, and they can spread that dead cap hit over the next 2 years. So maybe if they were to do that, then that's fine. But I do not get saving money for money's sake. Like, you've got to spend this offseason. You've got to spend. You've got to go get guys to improve this roster. Because I don't think this is something where expectations are, all right, let's win 7 games. Let's improve by a couple of wins. Let's get back to being, around 500, and that'll be a successful season. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Max, but I think if the Commanders win 8 games next year, we're not getting calls of, well, they improved from the 5 wins from the previous season, so they're going in the right direction. That's not the calls we're going to get. Not the calls we're going to get. We're going to get people frustrated that they're not back in the playoffs because this team showed what they're capable of. And I get that a lot of this is dependent on Jaden Daniels. But if there's a guy that I'm going to bet on, it is Jaden Daniels. So we'll see what happens. But if Adam Peters puts together a great roster and Jaden Daniels doesn't play well, I think that's a lot different than a crap roster playing like trash and Jaden Daniels being pulled down because of it. And right now, where they're at, I don't feel great about any aspects of this football team, with the exception of Jaden Daniels and maybe the offensive line. But there are questions about that now. You don't have a starting center, or maybe you do, but it's Nick Allegretti, which doesn't inspire a lot of confidence, but we'll see. Laramie Tunsil has questions whether you're going to get that done, and I hope that you can continue to develop Josh Connerly, and Sam Cosmi is solid, but you got to figure out left guard as well. So realistically, there are question marks on the O-line now, which was a pretty settled proposition in my mind going into the offseason, and Jaden Daniels is good. What else you got that you feel good about? Terry McLaurin? Okay. Who's number 2 at wide receiver? Who's catching passes at tight end? Who's your starting running back? Who's playing corner? Who's your starting middle linebacker? How are you going to rush the passer? How are you going to stop the run? Who's playing on the back end? Why do I have 15 questions going into year 3? Why do I have questions about almost every position with the exception of like 3 or 4? That's a problem. So he's got a lot of holes to fill. Some of it is his doing as well, because of the fact that he wasn't able to nail some of the draft picks going back to the 2024 class. And I understand that some people don't necessarily want to give up on those guys yet. I don't necessarily want to either, but it's also been 2 years. It's been 2 years. It's not like it's been, half a season. It's been a little bit of time. So we'll see if they're able to step up and play better. 301-230-0980. Let's get out to Reggie in DC. Reggie, what's going on?
Hey, what's going on, buddy? I listening to your just overview. I think you're way out there. First of all, you can't say nothing about the defense because we had a terrible defensive coordinator. Doc said this yesterday. When are we going to look at the people who are actually assigned to put our players in position to succeed and look at them versus the players? How do you know how do you know Madrono can't play? How do you know Owens can't play? You never gave him an opportunity, meaning Joe Witt. The scheme was bad. So, of course, if the scheme is bad, then how would you expect for me when you're not putting me in position to succeed? Now, fast forward to this year, we're going to be in a better scheme position if it's going to be similar to what we've seen with Brian Flores and what we've seen with Mike Zimmer. So now, again, if I get Oweh, I feel real good about that. If I get Phillips, that used to be with the Dolphins with the Eagles, feel good with that. If I get Mafe from Seattle, I feel good about that. If I get Walker, I feel good about that. Then you add a secondary piece. Now we're having a different conversation. The Adams-Peters, as far as his regime, and then be honest. I mean, if you're a fan, be honest, was okay. He wasn't a world beater. For me, he got pushed back a lot. He was okay, and I'm okay with actually moving on from him. But Adam Peters he had one thing to do. If you're a fan like I am, when have we had a quarterback? Kirk Cousins, he had one job. He got the quarterback position right, and as Minnesota having Justin Jefferson and Addison and T.J. Hawkinson and Aaron Jones have all these great players around when you ain't got a signal caller. As long as Jaden Daniels stay upright, I feel real good. Now, to your point, we got to get some pieces. We got to get a running back. We got to get Ben Sinnott. Now, one thing somebody pointed out, can Ben Sinnott play? I don't know. Trey McBride wasn't Trey McBride under Cliff Kingsbury. Trey McBride was Trey McBride when Cliff Kingsbury left. Now look at him. I'm not saying that Ben Sinnott is that, but we don't know if Ben Sinnott can play because I don't think Cliff's offense was predicated towards the tight end. So we really don't know. So I'm hearing you, and you're absolutely right. I'm not looking for no 8-win season. We need to get back to the playoffs.
Reggie,
then I'm going to be like, if we're not, oh yeah, now we got to raise all the red flags. But I think that
Reggie, real quick, I want to ask you something.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on Dan Quinn? Because my thing is, I don't disagree with you that the scheme sucked last year. I didn't think the coaching was very good. So then where the heck was Dan Quinn? He's your head coach, and you're retaining him for another year. So if you think that the scheme sucked and all that, I know they're bringing in a different D coordinator, but my question would then be, then why the heck did you not fire Dan Quinn? Like, if you truly believe, and I don't necessarily disagree with you, that the scheme sucked, players weren't put in position to succeed, injuries, all this stuff. If none of that is on the players and it was all scheme, well, then where the heck was the head coach, who, by the way, is a defensive head coach?
Yeah. Now, what I will say is, you can't fire him after he just took you to the NFC Championship. So look, okay, and people try to minimize scheme. Look at the offensive scheme. We had one scary player outside of our quarterback, which was Terry McLaurin. We had freaking Austin Eckler, Zach Ertz, freaking Noah Brown. But look at the scheme that Cliff Kingsbury employed, and look how it maximized everybody's talent, specifically your quarterback. Now you look on the defensive side. What is Dan Quinn going to do when Dan Quinn and Joe Witt run the same freaking defense? The only thing that Dan Quinn did was simplify it. So I'm not firing him, but he's a head coach. He did great year one. Year two, again, for me, I don't know anybody else. I'm chalking that up to injuries. If Dave Daniels played, I forget 17 games. If Dave Daniels played 14 games, 15 games from start to finish, and we finish like this, I think I'm calling for his head. I don't care what you did in year one. Yeah. But I don't know how a fan can look at this and not say, I know it's not a justification, it's not a reason. But come on, man. Your quarterback only completed from start to finish 4 games.
Yeah. No, I appreciate the phone call, Reggie. I think you brought up some good points there. I think for me, injuries played a role last season. There's no question about it. I'm not going to say it didn't. I do think some people are overstating how much injuries played a role. I think the scheme was terrible defensively last year. Yes, injuries did play a role with their edge rusher, but how much of a downgrade is it from Dietrich Wise to Jacob Martin? I actually don't think it's that much. If you want to say the injury is Jaden Daniels related and he didn't play at that same level, then I can fully get on board with that, because even when he was on the field, he didn't play to the same level that we saw him finish his rookie season at. So I can understand that, but I actually think Marcus played fairly well. So I feel like they still got top 32 quarterback play. You could argue at some points you were getting top 20 quarterback play out of Marcus Mariota. So I would make sure that you bring him back, by the way. That's something that I think we've kind of lost sight of now that the season's a little bit in the rear view. You got to make sure that you bring him back, because I like him as a backup quarterback. So I think injuries played a role. I think some people are chalking it up to, if they were fully healthy, they would have been in a pretty good spot. They would have won 10 games. I don't feel that same way. Maybe they win 2 more games, but I think there were so many flaws on last year's football team that the injuries, they made it worse, but I don't think it's something that if they would have been fully healthy, it would have suddenly been okay. They played a role, but it wasn't as significant as a lot of people make it out to be. And one of the issues I have with that is, if it were something, and I looked at the injuries last year and I said, okay, the reason that they weren't able to get to a spot that they wanted to be at with the injuries was because they didn't have guys that had been drafted 2 years ago, 3 years ago in the 4th or 5th round that they developed, and now say someone needs to miss time, and this dude that I drafted a couple years ago has been in the system for a while and I was able to plug him in. If they were able to say that sort of a thing, then I could understand that. But I mean, the secondary was very bad last year, and that was a decently healthy unit for a majority of the beginning of the season, and that unit was still terrible. They couldn't get pressure on the passer. The defensive tackles were fine for most of the year. They couldn't do anything. Von Miller was your leading sack man last year. That's embarrassing for the 2025-2026 season. That cannot happen. So I get that injuries played a role. I don't think it played as significant a role as some people make it out to be. I think they have to significantly improve the roster going into next year. And yes, they need Jaden Daniels, and a lot of it does hinge on Jaden Daniels to play really, really well. But they've also got to make sure that they have the help necessary for him. Last year, the question for me, one of the questions I had marked down, I went back and looked at my notes. One of the things I was talking about going into the season. If a receiver goes down, who steps up? Unfortunately, we saw injuries happen pretty quickly at wide receiver. But that shouldn't have been shocking either. Terry McLaurin, that was a risk you ran when you played the game that you did with him, regardless of what side you're on, whether it's Adam Peters or Terry McLaurin. That was a risk that was going to pop up because of how long it took to get that thing done. Noah Brown was hurt. We thought you'd lost that guy in OTAs. So it wasn't shocking when he missed most of training camp and then missed most of the season. And so then you're suddenly getting down to the rookie guys. You didn't count on Luke McCaffrey getting hurt. But again, you end up in a spot where some of the things that Adam Peters is in charge of, he didn't necessarily do as good of a job as you would have hoped. But going into year 3, you've got a lot of cap space. You've got picks. It's about going out there and using the resources correctly and building this football team up. Put Jaden in an opportune spot. And you're correct. You hit on the quarterback position. And that is great. And you bought yourself a couple of years because of that, especially when everything went correctly in year 1 and you went to an NFC championship game. I just don't want to waste Jaden now. I don't want it to be something where you're 5 or 6 years into this thing and you're like, man, can we recapture what happened in his rookie season ever again? I want to see him playing in big-time football games because I think that's where he's shown his best as well. I think Jaden wants to keep playing in big-time football games as well, obviously. So I think that's a big thing, finding a way that you can build this thing up so that if Jaden plays at that high level again, you're not talking about a team that suddenly just wins 9 or 10 games. You're talking about a team that goes to an NFC championship game and hopefully a Super Bowl and hopefully wins one. Because if Jaden plays at that kind of a level, that's how good he is. Make sure the rest of the team around him is capable of doing that, understanding that he can lift all these guys to a higher level than you would ever expect. But you also he can't lift garbage that high. Like, even if Jaden played out of his mind, I'm not sure that some of the roster that you're looking at last year was much better than the previous season. I think in some cases it was worse. I don't want that to be the case. Let's make this thing get better and better and build on things as years go on. 301-230-0980. What's your confidence level in Adam Peters? Toby Altizer sitting in for Kevin Sheehan.
All right. Happy Tuesday, everybody. We start off with the Wizards last night. They lost to the Rockets, but things got fiery. Jameer Watkins was shoved to the ground in transition by Tari Eason. Trae Young was ejected from the contest after leaving the bench to support his teammates. Tari Eason was also ejected for his shove on Watkins. Trae Young now may face a $50,000 fine and potential 1-game suspension that will put his debut versus the Jazz at risk. Plus, the Commanders, they are set to let Jake Moody walk in free agency. So kicker now atop the list for Commanders needs. Plus, Breece Hall was franchise tagged by the New York Jets, and the Atlanta Falcons set to play in Madrid, rounding out the final host of the NFL International Contest. Tonight, we got the Wizards. They're back in action versus the Orlando Magic. That'll be over on Bloomberg 99.1 at 6:45. Plus, the Caps, they take on the Utah Mammoth live from Capital One Arena. That'll be over on 106.7 The Fan, also at 6:45. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live every day from 10 to 1. You can catch programs like Take Command all off season. Don't forget to hit the like button whenever you do decide to join us and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that is what's trending.
Kevin Sheehan Show. Toby Altizer in for Kevin today. He'll be back tomorrow. 301-230-0980 if you'd like to hop in. We'll get to Ryan Fowler at 12 o'clock when I get his thoughts on the NFL draft. So my thing is looking at how they can improve this football team. One of the reasons that I'm not as big on going with Jeremiah Love is I think that they can improve at that position by signing somebody in free agency for a reasonable amount of money. That if they were to go with Jeremiah Love and try to sign somebody else to improve at another position is going to cost significantly more. That's part of the reason why I'm not going Jeremiah Love. Not that I don't believe in him as a football player. One of the top guys on the free agent market for running back is now off the market. Jets running back Breece Hall was just tagged by the New York Jets. So that takes one of the top guys off the market. When you look at some of the other top guys, so this is Greg Rosenthal's list on NFL.com. Kenneth Walker is 10th on his top 101 rankings for free agency. Kenneth Walker is there. You can look at Travis Etienne is at 24, someone actually I'd be very interested in. I think he gives you a lot in the modern game in the way that he can catch the ball in the backfield and do some of the stuff. Although he's probably not a sexy name that people are in love with. I think he's a pretty good football player. Kenneth Gainwell is on this list. Rashad White almost seems like you could probably go ahead and print jerseys for him because he wants to play here with Jaden Daniels. Rico Dowdle, Tyler Algier. So it's an interesting set of running backs that I don't know that any of these guys, with the exception of Kenneth Walker, now that Breece Hall's off the market, inspire a lot of confidence. But I'd be pretty interested in a guy like Etienne. I think a duo of Rashad White and Bill could actually be pretty good. The thing for me is I think if you gave a full complement of carries to Bill, I don't know that he's going to wow you in terms of like a Jeremiah Love, but I think he can be 1,000-yard back. I think he can be someone that's reasonably effective. I don't know that he's ever a big-time difference maker, but for what you're spending for him, and then if you brought in another back like a Rashad White or someone of that ilk where it's not breaking the bank, it's maybe a 1A, 1B situation or a guy that's kind of splitting the backfield a little bit, I think you can still get an effective running game. And I forget what caller just brought it up about scheme. I think a better running scheme is going to make the running backs, whoever's here, better. I don't know that it's necessarily that you need to have big-time backs like a Jeremiah Love. Yes, he's going to excel even more in a really good running scheme, but I think Bill would do really well in a little bit of a zone scheme, and you could see him unlocked. And I think there's still a lot of untapped potential in there. Just watching him run, he was different than everybody else that was out there for Washington last year. And I get the fumbling concerns. He wasn't as good in the middle of the season. It seemed like he was thinking. But I'm actually really, really high on Bill still. Not to say that he's going to be anything better than a guy like a Jeremiah Love. But I'd be interested in something where you bring in a veteran running back to pair with him, and that be your running back tandem. Now, it needs to be something that if Bill, for whatever reason, has a big-time sophomore slump, it's somebody that you feel like you could trust. Like, I even though it's kind of a lot of people were just thinking he's going to go back or kind of going to be here, so maybe people are less inclined to be excited about it with Rashad White, I think he'd be just fine, right? Like in what he could give you here, and that be your back tandem where you've got Bill and White, and it's not necessarily like it's going to wow you, but I think this offensive line is decent enough. And with David Blau bringing over some new ideas to the run game, getting under center, doing some different things like that, I actually think you could see a run game that is much better. Even though the statistics have been pretty decent the last couple of years, I do think they lie a little bit in terms of the effectiveness of the run game at times. But I think you'll see a pretty good running attack if that was what they go with. It'd be better if they went and got an elite running back, no question. But even if they just went with something where they went bargain shopping there at the running back position and spent big-time money elsewhere, I think that's a way that you could address this thing and you could see them still get an effective run game. Max, what would you do for the running back position? Are you taking Love? Are you trying to go top of the market after a Kenneth Walker? Or are you fine with doing something like Rashad White and Bill as your tandem going into next year?
I could definitely see a Rashad White and Bill kind of tandem, but I do think that, and the Commanders have said this, or have been reported to have said that what they're looking for is a power back to kind of run guys down, and that's going to be big if you do end up drafting Love. But there are a couple guys out there that I would be interested in. Now, I do want to put a little bit of a flag or flyer on ETN, just because
I would love ETN.
he does a lot of the things, like you said, that Jeremiah Love does, and I think they graded very similarly as well when we were looking at him. But there is like this little lingering thing. There might be this nagging injury, there might not. So I know the Jags have to make that decision pretty soon. I mean, free agency's coming up, so we're gonna find out kind of what it is and what his market looks like. But good running backs keep falling off of the market left and right. Like Brees Hall just got tagged, so it's gonna be a tough decision for AP. But I kind of want it to go in the direction of, if you're not going to draft a Love, then yeah, supplement it with something with one of these free agents that are going to hit the market soon.
I know it's not a sexy name, but you know who's gone for back-to-back 1,000-yard rushing seasons is Rico Dowdle.
You did mention him earlier.
I know it's not sexy, but the last 2 seasons, he's basically had the same year. In Dallas in 24, 235 carries for 1,079 yards. Last year, 236 carries for 1,076 yards. So 1 carry difference and 3 yards difference, averaging 4.6 a pop.
Give me Rico Dowdle, Rashad White, and Bill Krosky-Barrett in the backfield.
Yeah, and like I think that is a reasonable backfield. That isn't terrible.
And Jeremy McNichols, of course.
I'd be interested what they're going to do with him. I would love to have him back. He's been fantastic in the role that he's played. Really good pass blocker. And there's something about him. There are certain players that have this. It doesn't matter what the distance is on third down. It's third and McNichols. You find a way to get him the football, and he'll get hit 7 yards short of the sticks, and he's going to find a way past the sticks. I don't know what that skill is called, but whatever it is, Jeremy McNichols over the last 2 years has that skill. He just finds a way to get the first down. He has a nose for getting first down. So, yeah, I mean, I'd be very interested in that. I just think that's the way that I would do it personally, is how much is that going to cost you? Not a lot. Versus if you went Jeremiah Love with pick number 7 and then you wanted to go sign a D end, well, now you've got to go spend $20 million on Odafe Owe versus, maybe they still do that, but versus if I go with David Bailey at 7 and sign Rico Dowdle, I think that's a better bang for your buck in terms of bargain than it is necessarily taking Love at 7. That's kind of why I lean that direction. Let's talk to Ryan Fowler next to get his thoughts on the NFL draft, where Washington should go. I'm going to get his thoughts on Jeremiah Love as a prospect as well. Toby Altizer sitting in for Kevin Sheehan on the Team 980. It is the Kevin Sheehan Show on the Team 980. Toby Altizer filling in for Kevin today. It's time to get out to our guest hotline. Welcome in one of my favorite guests on NFL Draft, Commanders stuff, Ryan Fowler. Ryan, how you doing today?
Doing good, Toby. Always appreciate having me on, man.
Absolutely. So I want to start here. We started the show talking a little bit about Caleb Downs and the injury rumor that came out. We'll get to that in a moment. But I want to ask you about Jeremiah Love. I've seen everybody going crazy about him running the 4.36 40, which is understandable. It happens every year. Someone crazy runs has a great 40 time. Sonny Styles obviously was a big talk of the combine, but now everybody just seems like, oh, there's no way he's there at 7, or if he is, Washington has to run the card in. What do you make of Love as a prospect, and where do you rank him among running backs we've seen come out the last couple of years?
Yeah, I think to answer the latter first, he's up there with the Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs class for me. I think I have him a little bit ahead of what Ashton Genty was last year. Absolutely. And I think Jeremiah Love is going to be a guy really wherever he lands. I think he can be a guy with the correlating surroundings, specifically what you have up front, to be a guy that's the top 5 running back in football in quick succession as well. And I always think back when trying to think about what Jeremiah Love could do in Washington, Toby, in that, when Dallas drafted Ezekiel Elliott years ago, they had the front 5 to do it, and he was obviously excellent there. When the Giants drafted Saquon Barkley, number 2, they didn't have the front 5 for him to succeed at the way that they wanted him to. So correlating surroundings matter, and I think what makes it so intriguing for Washington at 7 is because they have their guys. They have that front 5 that they really like, and obviously right now potentially with Nick Allegretti moving forward after the Tyler Biadasz release at center. But Jeremiah Love is just a dynamic player. He's a guy that can win inside and outside the tackles. I think he's a unique player as far as he can win around you, he can win through you, he can go over you as well. His ability in space, I think, is going to continue to progress. Even talking with teams over the last few weeks, they love his ability in pass pro as well. So there's no concerns as far as his ability to come on the field in third down and pick up a guy blitzing through the A or B gaps. He's just an all-around elite football player that's going to be a special football player wherever he goes. And if he ends up in Washington, it's obviously a dynamic backfield to the likes of where I think about it way back in the early 2000s with Michael Vick and Warwick Dunn all the way down there in Atlanta, how electric they were. So fits at 7, that's an absolute fit, but I think we could all agree that the Commanders need help on the defensive side of the ball more so on offense right now.
Yeah, 100%. Speaking of that side of the football, to me, it seems like when you look at this draft class, obviously the top talent is not at premier positions, but if you're just going off of pure talent, I think to me the top 2 guys in this draft are Jeremiah Love and Caleb Downs. So we got a report yesterday that there might be some sort of lingering injury with Caleb Downs. I'm curious if you heard anything about that, but more specifically with Downs, how do you think he would fit into what Washington wants to do with Durante Jones? Because to me, he's very versatile, so it almost allows them wherever they go in free agency, they could bring him in to play one of 3 different roles and he'd fit in just fine.
Yeah, with the injury stuff with Downs, I'm not going to act like I'm a doctor by any means, but it's as far as reaching out to sources here over the past really 24 hours or so, it's not a long-term concern from any team that I've talked to. So that should be put to the wayside, I think, as far as a guy that maybe slips past the top 10 picks. I just don't see that happening. And then as far as the fit with Downs in this defense, he is labeled as a safety, but overall, this is a guy that can play as a big nickel. This is a guy that can play as an overhang safety. This is a guy that can play off-ball backer. He is going to be someone right away that impacts all 3 levels of really any defense. But in this defense, it's where you're going to be different as far as what you do up front, whether you have an odd front with 3 guys or an even front with 4 players. He can eliminate tight ends up the seam. He tackles his tail off. I can't remember, Toby, a player in the last 5 to 7 years that tackles in the open space better than Caleb Downs does. His IQ is sensational. He is not Derwin James, Kyle Hamilton, and Nick Emenwari from an athletic perspective. But he is someone that understands the game at a finite level, for me, unlike I've ever seen at the safety position. He understands what he's looking at. And I think it's a huge thing that matters for a young guy that's played big-time competition both at Alabama and at Ohio State. So to get a guy like this to impact all 3 levels of your defense, I'm right alongside with you there. He's right alongside Jeremiah Love for me also as the 1A and 1B in this class as the 2 premier players here in 2026.
Talking with Ryan Fowler, host of Commanding the Huddle here on Kevin Sheehan Show on the Team 980. Toby Altizer sitting in. Staying with Downs, is there a little bit of a concern there with the idea that, hey, maybe we're not taking a physical freak here, but it's more so his football IQ? Like, do people feel like that translates better because of the fact that you're not relying on physical traits, and this is a guy that you feel like immediately is one of the smartest football players on your team?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think it really comes down to now, Toby, we live in this analytical age really for all sports where everybody wants the big, fast, strong guys that really fit your thresholds. And don't get me wrong, teams have specific thresholds at specific positions to where if you don't meet them, you're not going to draft them no matter who you are. But I think overall, I think the appreciation of the old eye test has to come down when you watch Caleb Downs. And he's not built like some of these other players, these unique players at the safety position that you see across football, specifically with Derwin and with Kyle in Baltimore. But overall, he's just a darn good football player. I think that's where the appreciation has to come in, because every single time you watch the tape, again, in the SEC or at Ohio State, he's always in the right spot. He's always near the football. And again, for this defense specifically, where you just need more talent, by no means, even if you just draft Caleb Downs, your defense is already a top 15 unit, but he is going to impact every single level of your defense to make everybody else around him. Similarly to what you look on the offensive side of the ball, with what Jaden was able to do and elevating those around him as well. I think he has that potential impact. And he makes up for anything, lack of verticality, what he may run to the 40 or change of direction. That, for me, is not a worry at all. He's just an elite football player at the end of the day. And I think the athleticism is absolutely there. You can combine those two. And as I've said before, Toby, I think he enters Washington, if they draft him there at 7, as the most talented safety to enter the D.C. area since Sean Taylor way back ago.
Let's go to his teammate, Sonny Styles. He was the star of the combine. Just basically seemed like he was setting records, everything that he did, just absolute stud. What do you make of him as a prospect? And he was someone that, to me, we talk about versatility with Durante Jones's new scheme, and Sonny Styles fits that too, being able to do a little bit of everything. What would you make of him if he were available at 7? Do you think he makes it to 7?
As of right now, Toby, I don't think he makes it to 7. I think, heading into Combine Week, you could say he was in that 7 to 12 range. Well, I think potentially 7 for the Commanders is his floor. And I think he is a guy. Look at the Giants at 5. John Harbaugh, there's a lot of interest there with the Ray Lewis, Roquan Smith background. He's a defensive-minded head coach. Bobby Okereke is going to be gone there. Micah McFadden in New York's a free agent. That's their guy that can a green dot for them. But in Washington, you plug him next to potentially Jordan McGee, who you'd like to see more snaps, or even a guy like Kane Madrano. You want to talk about young pieces with athletes in the middle of your defense. That's the guy you plug and play for the next decade, and you don't think twice about it. And it's funny because we just talked about Caleb Downs with some of the maybe not slight concerns from his athletic profile. You have no concerns with that with Sonny Styles. He's an absolute freak as far as his size and the speed and metrics that he has there. So you combine elite football player, elite athlete, plug him and play him. He can do whatever for you. He can fill the gaps. He can run to the edges. He can cover tight ends. He's a player, again, green dot for the next 10 years. And what a difference that was. As far as the speed in the middle of this defense, going from Bobby Wagner to Sonny Styles, that is a Lamborghini compared to a broken down 1995 car, if you know what I mean there, Toby.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy because to me, if they would have used him in an Arvell Reese role, I think he could have been good as like an edge rusher too. Like I think he could be good in basically any sort of role you want to use him. Want to switch, sticking with Ohio State, which is just crazy how many Ohio State guys are at the top of this draft. Let's go to the offensive side. Carnell Tate. I saw people talk, Adam Schefter was tweeting about his 4.52 and some people timed him at a 4.4, whatever. I don't really care about his 40 time because I think he's silky smooth and really good regardless. What do you make of this receiver class? And then, the Mekhi Lemon stuff going on, and apparently didn't interview well, and people were freaking out about how he looked in his interviews. Jordan Tyson was doing not real reps on the bench press, but still looked incredibly strong, but there's the injury concerns there. Like, what do you make of this receiver class at the top of it?
Yeah, I really do like the receiver class. Starting at the top, I will say this. I've last few days, I've talked to a lot of individuals about the interview stuff with Mekhi Lemon, and I've heard a lot of positives. I've heard nothing as far as negatives. I saw the stuff obviously at the media or combine interviews and things like that, his podium session, where some people had rubbed him the wrong way. He's just a guy that's an extremely competitive individual, and that's someone that just cares about the game and wants to hone his craft. And I've heard nothing negative on my end. Now, of course, where you get your information from is always important, but I have no issues as far as who the individual is behind the face mask, if you will, of Mekhi Lemon. But Jordan Tyson, I think the injuries are obviously, for me, a short-term concern. I think overall him as a player, I want to see him get off the line of scrimmage a little bit better against press man. I'm right there with you with Carnell Tate. I'm not worried about the 40 at all. I think he's just someone that's extremely smooth. You always know what you're going to get out of guys out of Ohio State that can win at every level, go over the top, some of the best hands in the class. But overall, Toby, with this receiver class, there are varying body types on all 3 days. You have your bigger receivers on day 2, like Jacoby Lane from USC, some of the best hands in the class. or Trey Lance's younger brother and Bryce Lance, who really had a nice showing at the combine. Then you have some of these 5'10", 5'11" separators like Zachariah Branch from Georgia, who I thought had an excellent week at the combine. And then one of my favorite players in this class at the position, probably going to go early portions of day 3, is Kevin Coleman Jr. 5'11", just an elite separator among anybody in this class. Mekhi Lemon gets all the attention as far as, hey, he's a Monter St. Brown, he's this, he's that. But as you work into the middle rounds, later rounds, where you have to find that value or players for the Commanders to where I think right away he's better than both Jalen Lane and Luke McCaffrey, Kevin Coleman's ability to separate at the line of scrimmage is as good as anybody's in this class. And I think he's going to make a team very, very happy on day 2, early portions of day 3. So a really nice receiver class, big body types, smaller body types, varying guys in this class on all 3 days.
Talking with Ryan Fowler here on the Kevin Sheehan Show. Toby Altizer sitting in for him. Obviously, all the attention at the running back position goes to Jeremiah Love, but it's crazy that a guy the size of Mike Washington ran the speed that he did, was the fastest 40. What do you think the range is for him, for someone his size to be able to do what he did running a 4.33? Where do you think he is? Because he'd be something that if he fell to a later round, do you think he's someone that Washington could look at if he's still available? 6'1", 223, ran a 4.33. Wasn't maybe the most impressive numbers-wise in college, but for that speed at that size, it's very intriguing.
Yeah, I think he's going to go early on day 2, right? And with the Commanders, no second-round selection, I don't think he's going to be available for the Burgundy Gold and Adam Peters. But a heck of a story as well. 3 different schools, Buffalo, New Mexico to Arkansas. You mentioned the height, weight, speed stuff. That doesn't last long. That second-round bucket is going to be flying off the board with running backs like him, like Jadarian Price. Where does Jonah Coleman go? Teams really like the former receiver turned running back from Clemson and Adam Randall. You're going to see the linebackers come off the board. But overall, I think for the Commanders, really day 3. I've heard many conversations that they want a guy that is maybe in that Peyton Barber, Chris Rodriguez type of role to where you can move the pile a little bit on those 3rd and 3s, 3rd and 4s. I know they really still like Jeremy McNichols and potentially want to bring him back to complement Bill Krosky-Merritt. So on day 3, I think there's some other guys. Shamari Taylor from Virginia, Terrian Stewart from Virginia Tech has got no attention, but his film is outstanding as far as getting him behind this front 5. I think he could be a steal in this class. But I think one of the guys that I really do like late day 3 that played the slot back position, had an RB1 workload at Navy, is Eli Heidenreich, who had a really good combine week, was sensational at Shrine, has absolutely killed the interview process, and is someone right away that could come in, potentially 6th, 7th round, maybe a priority UDFA bucket, that is a 3rd down type of piece for this David Blau offense. He mentioned he's going to work under center, he's going to do some play action, some motion, get a unique piece in this backfield with outstanding hands. We saw what Austin Eckler could do in this offense when healthy. This is a guy with a different type of juice, youth-infused piece. Keep an eye late day 3 where the Commanders have 3 of their 6 picks, 6th and 7th round, on Eli Heidenreich from Navy.
Yeah, isn't he the all-time leading receiver at Navy as well? Almost one.
Yes, he is.
Incredible. I love rooting for anybody that comes from a service academy, and also, away to my heart, I'm rocking Hokies gear, so Terrion Stewart would be very, very intriguing if he were able to come here to Washington. Another guy that I thought was a standout at the combine, Dylan Thieneman. This safety class is really interesting. Obviously, we talk plenty about Caleb Downs because he's potential top 10 pick, but Emmanuel McNeil-Warren is someone that a lot of people really, really like. Dylan Thieneman is a really, really impressive safety as well. What do you make of the guys behind Caleb Downs and where you could see them slotted in?
Yeah, if that's really the thought process right now for Adam Peters, right? If Caleb is gone at 7, who could you get back end of day 2 or back on the board in day 3? I think Bud Clark from TCU is super experienced player, spent 6 years down there for the Horned Frogs, someone that is one of the elite ball hawks in this class. I think Ahmad Moses from SMU is a heck of a player. How about Jacoby Thomas from Miami? What he did for the back end of that Miami Hurricanes defense all the way to the national championship game. He can play high. He can play low. He's a physical player. Athlete, if Adam Peters wants them, he's consistently prioritized guys that have really above a 9 on the RAS score. Robert Spears Jennings from Oklahoma. Now, he has a little bit of a ways to go for me as a football player, but usually when you're in the back end of day 3, middle portions there, you try to find traits on guys, height, weight, speed, that can come in and maybe be a multi-phase type of contributor, right? Can contribute on defense and contribute on special teams. So Robert Spears Jennings as well from Oklahoma. And then what about the 3 Arizona guys? Dalton Johnson, Genesis Smith, and trading Stooks. I think Stooks may be a guy in that third round, if he's even there, that I would potentially love for this Commanders defense. He's a big nickel. He can play high, athletic intangibles off the charts. That's a name to know specifically if Caleb Downs, they can't get him there at 7.
Last thing on the draft, I do want to get your thoughts on one quick thing about running back before we let you go here. But on the edge rushers, we know that Ruben Bain was going to come in with short arms. The arms measured under 31, which is a little bit alarming, but at the same point, we kind of knew that he was going to have short arms. David Bailey, curious what your thoughts were at the combine, and obviously Arvell Reese put on a show at the combine as well, which isn't surprising. He's a freak athlete. What do you make of those top guys? And if you were picking right now, if you had your choice of those three, if you're Washington, which one would you take?
Yeah, I love the hybrid ability of Arvell Reese, but obviously you have to align player with fit and scheme and what you want to do. That matters so much. I know it goes overlooked every single year with really offense and defense of where you're landing. Correlating surroundings and scheme it just really, really matters. So Arvell Reese is a guy probably among those three I'd put. It's really a 1A, 1B, 1C, but I know it's not the answer you're looking for. But I think right now, all of those three guys, I've been high on David Bailey as far as the most explosive pass rusher in this class. And I think he's a guy, if you were to look among those three and say, who's the quickest guy right away that can get me 11 to 12 sacks, something the Commanders haven't had really since, Ryan Kerrigan consistently. So I think David Bailey's the most explosive guy. But for Ruben Bain, Toby, he is the most powerful rusher in this class. He's the best run defender in this class. And when I look at arm length, it doesn't so much concern me as far as just looking at fundamentally basis of arm length. I think what it comes down to is also a defensive end can make that up with body positioning. He can work it up with angles, his hands, his punch timing, hand placement. And when I watch Ruben Bain, not only during the season, but even also the conversations I've had with his teammates, Markel Bell, 6'9", 36 on the arms, one of the longest players to enter the NFL here in 2026. CeCe Maui-Noah on the opposite side of that Miami offensive line, first-round pick, said this guy's an absolute nightmare to deal with in practice. He's not a guy that wants to be the flash and the glamour and this. He's a guy that wants to strap up every day and compete his tail off and dominate, whether he's at 3-tech, 5-tech, a wide 9, whatever. So I think among those guys right now, I've been on the train of David Bailey as my top edge rusher in this class. But I think as of right now, I'm giving Ruben Bain a slight little mark ahead of those guys. And the arm concerns, for me, I don't have them at all. I think he's a hell of a ball player.
Interesting. I like that. Talking with Ryan Fowler, host of Commanding the Huddle. Last one for you here. We just learned that Breece Hall is going to be tagged by the Jets. It sounds like Kenneth Walker is going to hit free agency. Curious, if you're Adam Peters going into this, how would you go about addressing the running back room for Washington this year?
I think free agency is potentially the way to go. I know you don't have the capital really day 2. You mentioned Mike Washington earlier, or if they wanted to go with a Jadarian Price day 2. I don't think they're going to be in a spot to add one of those types of guys. I think we could all agree that they really found a diamond in the rough, right, with Bill Krofsky-Merritt and what he's going to be this year. But I think the common names of the Rashad Whites, and you mentioned a couple of others, and they bring back Jerry McNichols. I know a guy even like, where they want to bring in a veteran like Kareem Hunt, where they want to bring in another chance and give Miles Sanders another shot. I don't know. We'll see what happens in free agency. But I do think that route in a couple of weeks will really see the plan of the Commanders of what they want to do on either side of the ball. They prioritize safety in free agency. Well, maybe they don't think Caleb Downs is going to be there. They add a running back, probably not going to add another guy in the draft. So these next few weeks, Toby, are really going to paint the picture of what Adam Peters and company are going to do here once we get to April.
So you sound like you're pretty high on Bill still, because I like him, and I don't know if I still view him as like a lead back, but I think if you brought in like a Rico Dowdle was someone we mentioned, or Rashad White, someone of that nature, where you go almost like a 1A, 1B type of approach, I think he can still be effective. But you're still pretty high on Bill?
I do love Bill. I do. I think he's a heck of a ball player, and I think the more touches that he gets, he's going to become more comfortable. I mean, he's one of the more explosive pieces, Toby, that they've had in the backfield in a little while. He's very differently built than some of the guys that you see as RB1s in football. I'm right there with you. I don't think he's a legit RB1 bell cow that you give 20-plus touches a game to, but maybe they could even prioritize a guy like Tyler Algier, right, that played second fiddle to Bijan Robinson in Atlanta the last few years as a bigger physical ball carrier. And you have both those guys, still young pieces. Tyler has a piece that really deserves more touches, and I think that someone could be a heck of a piece behind this front five. You go into this year with Algier and Merritt as your two guys. I think that's a heck of a pairing behind Jaden Daniels in this new look David Blau offense wants to get after you inside and outside the tackles.
Ryan, appreciate the time. Great insight as always. Hope you have a great lead up to the draft and free agency. It's about to all go down here this offseason now.
Absolutely. Thanks as always, Toby. Talk soon, man.
Thanks. That's Ryan Fowler, host of Commanding the Huddle. Make sure you check out his stuff. He's fantastic. He's one of my favorites to talk about obviously worked with Washington, so knows Washington stuff inside and out, and so good at breaking down the NFL draft. So make sure you check out his stuff at _Ryan Fowler _ on Twitter. All right, want to get back into the draft a little bit, and we'll talk running backs as well now that we learned that it sounds like Kenneth Walker is going to hit free agency, so we can dive into that a little bit more. But I kind of played out how I think the top 10 picks are going to play out. We'll talk about that next. You're listening to the Kevin Sheehan Show. Toby Altizer filling in. Kevin Sheehan Show. Toby Altizer in for Kevin. He'll be back at 10 a.m. tomorrow. This is one of my favorite parts of the NFL calendar. I love when you can play general manager and just kind of sit around and think about how you would structure the offseason, how you would sign free agents and who you would go after, how you would structure the NFL draft. One of my favorite parts of the NFL calendar. Obviously, the best part is when football is actually being played. But after that, I love when you're right now and you're getting set for how you're going to make the team better. I love it. It's one of my favorite things. It's why I love doing things in Madden, making trades and all those sorts of things. I love it. So I'm excited about how this NFL draft is going to play out. I love putting together my own mock draft. I'm not generally very good at it. I kind of just, I don't have sources inside.
Vibes related.
Yeah, like I just kind of go off of how I think things are going to go and logically and basically look at a depth chart, look at some of the top lists, and then be like, well, this might work. But I went through an exercise where I did this last night because I was just thinking about it and how I see this playing out. And I think it's interesting the scenario Washington could find themselves in. And I think this feels pretty real to me. And I think even some of the betting odds, just from things I've seen, kind of line up with this. So I want to get your thoughts. Max, if you want to chime in, feel free. So number one, I have the Raiders taking Mendoza.
Bad pick.
I don't think we need to spend much time there. That's pretty obvious. Like you can go ahead and make your Fernando Mendoza jerseys if you're a Raiders fan. Number two, I'd seen some things coming around that maybe David Bailey goes number 2 to the Jets. I think after the combine where Arvell Reese looked like an absolute freak and David Bailey looked good.
He looked fine.
But there was still a little bit of like tightness in some of the stuff. Like some of the flags that people bring up, like red flags, you saw a little bit of that, but it's not anything that's like, oh, take them off your draft board. Like, okay, there are less concerns athletically with Arvell Reese than David Bailey. So I see them saying, you know what, screw it. Let's take the freak athlete and we'll figure out how to use them. So the Jets go Arvell Reese at 2, which obviously a lot of people had before the combine. I think some people had switched up a little bit. I think you see that going back to Arvell Reese. Number 3, I could see them going a lot of different directions. Some people are even saying that Jeremiah Love could go number 3 to the Cardinals. I don't know how that would make much sense for them, considering they just have no direction with their franchise right now. They have none. And like I talked about, you get running backs that come out in the draft every couple of years that are really, really talented, that are generational, quote unquote, difference makers. So to me, there might be another Jeremiah Love in 2 to 3 years when the Cardinals maybe have a more understanding of where they're going. To me, the best option when you're trying to figure out the direction of your team, it's either edge rusher or offensive line. Like just build up the trenches when you have no idea where you're going so that hopefully once you do get it figured out, you have an idea of, you have the foundation set a little bit up front. So to me, they take Francis Maui-Noah out of Miami, right tackle. They have a left tackle already. You get a right tackle. You don't know who the quarterback is, but maybe you bring in somebody next year, 2 years, or you trade for someone this offseason, you feel a little bit better. Like, okay, we at least have the offensive line. So I could see Arizona go in that direction when they don't necessarily have a direction as a franchise. Number 4, I saw recently that he's now the betting odds favorite to go here. Jeremiah Love goes to the Tennessee Titans.
Really?
I could see them making a move. Like, to me, when you get a quarterback like you have with Cam Ward, and maybe this is why people feel like you should take Jeremiah Love in Washington if he's available, but you do everything possible to just go ahead and let's help this guy as much as possible. And I would generally prefer to go receiver, but Jeremiah Love is more talented than any receiver in this draft. So they go Jeremiah Love to Tennessee at number 4. And I think the betting odds are starting to lean that way. So I don't think that's all that shocking. Number 5, Ryan Fowler mentioned this fit. I think it makes a lot of sense when you consider who the new coach of the Giants is. Sonny Styles goes to the Giants at 5. He loves linebackers. He's worked with teams that have elite middle linebackers. So you get a chance to get one that's probably the best athlete in this year's draft. Showed out at the combine. You wouldn't be able to get anybody else at this sort of a caliber anywhere else in the draft. Like, it's not where you pass on Sonny Styles and you can find another pretty good linebacker later. There's just not dudes that move like Sonny Styles. Really, anywhere. There's a few linebackers maybe, but he's like a Fred Warner type difference maker, middle linebacker. Giants go there at 5. I think for the most part, that feels pretty chalky. there's maybe a little bit of a change you could see, but that seems fairly realistic. I have a difficulty figuring out exactly what's going to happen at 6 with the Browns. They're another team that I don't quite understand where they're going. I don't know if they quite understand where they're going. So you would generally go offensive tackle there. I've seen them mocked with Spencer Fano or Maui Noah if he's not taken by the Cardinals and they go Fano or something of that nature. I opted to go somewhere different here because Fano had a little bit shorter arms from what I saw. So after the Will Campbell discussion, after the run in the playoffs, I think you could maybe see that brought up a little bit more. They need playmakers in a bad, bad way. They just don't have dudes to make plays on offense. Harold Fannin is a interesting tight end who's going to get a bigger role this year after they probably let go of David Njoku. They have Jerry Jeudy, and then that's it, really. They have some guys in the backfield. I like Quinshon Judkins. I like Dylan Sampson. I like some of the guys they have back there. But pass catching wise, they just don't have dudes. So they go with the first wide receiver off the board. They take Buckeye, Carnell Tate. What do you make of that pick? Carnell Tate to the Browns. Do you think that makes some sense?
Ooh. It does. It does. I mean, they do need a wide receiver 1 because Jerry Judy's not going to be able to.
Well, they just need weapons, period.
That's true.
Even if he's not a quote-unquote wide receiver 1.
And if Love's off the board, like that's the most weapon guy you're going to find right now.
Yeah,
like, at this point in the draft. So, yeah, I could see it.
So they go with Tate there, and that brings up the interesting scenario that, again, I don't know that not that long ago we would have thought this is a possible scenario, but I think it lays itself out here. I don't think anything that I've done here is that crazy. You know who's on the board still at pick number 7? David Bailey, Reuben Bain, and Caleb Downs. You could take any one of those 3 because the only guys that you were realistically targeting that are gone would be Sonny Styles, Arvell Reese, Jeremiah Love. And if that's where you end up, where you have the choice of Bailey, Bain, and Downs, I don't know that there's a wrong pick there. I have Washington taking David Bailey because I think edge rusher is probably where they would go. Personally, I would take Caleb Downs. That's where I would lean. But I think that's an interesting scenario because I think sometimes this is fun. It's a lot easier. Last year trying to figure out who they were going to pick at pick 29, trying to get the first 28 picks was a little bit more difficult, let's say, than trying to figure out the first 6 picks. We already know 1, 2 through 6 could go a bunch of different ways. But I do think this is a very real scenario where you end up in a spot that isn't horrible. Because for a little bit, it looked like, there might be a chance you don't feel like you get the guy you necessarily want at 7. I think Washington's in a fine spot, a really fine spot where they're at. Now, the interesting part about this here is I don't know that you have a lot of trade down scenarios. I just don't. I think the 2 that I see that could happen, one is much more likely than the other. So we'll go with the less likely one first. I've thrown this out for a while. If the Rams were to fall in love with Ty Simpson and want to move up from 13 to 7 to make sure that they get him, maybe. Now, they're jumping ahead of the Saints who aren't taking a quarterback, the Chiefs who aren't taking a quarterback, the Bengals who aren't taking a quarterback, but getting ahead of Miami who maybe would be interested. So at that point, do you just try to trade up with one of the teams that's right behind Washington? Maybe. But if Washington's like, we don't need full value because we understand how this draft is, maybe you would consider that. That's highly unlikely in my opinion. I don't think Ty Simpson's worthy of a top 10 pick. The other one that's interesting, and will lead into a little bit of our discussion that we'll have to wrap up the show next. What if Jeremiah Love's sitting there at 7 and Kansas City says, all right, we don't want the Saints to get this guy. We'll move up. I wouldn't say that scenario is that likely, but I could see it happening. I could see it being something that the Chiefs consider if Washington's willing to take a little bit less than traditional value. Now, the thing that I would want is to make sure that you're getting truly adding a pick, not necessarily doing like a pick swap deal. That was one of the issues that I kind of felt you had when you did the trade down a couple of years ago that netted the Eagles, Cooper DeJean, and Washington, Mike Sanders and others. It was more so pick swaps that was just re-maneuvering around the draft versus actually adding picks. I would like to see them add picks if they make some sort of move where they move down to 9 with the Kansas City Chiefs And in that scenario, if they were going to move up to take Jeremiah Love to make sure that the Saints don't take him, you're probably still in a spot if this played out the way that it does right now. Like, you could end up with a David Bailey. You could still end up with a Reuben Bain or a Caleb Downs. And I think that'd be totally fine. I would love for that scenario to play out. I just don't feel that's highly likely. And it feels like for this year, if anybody's looking to do anything in the draft, it's not move up, it's move down, because you even heard it listening to Ryan Fowler. Like, there are some intriguing guys at the end of the first round, day 2 on the second and third round. It's less, oh man, we got to get this guy in the top 10, and more, man, if I could have a lot of picks 25 to 75, if I could have 2 or 3 in that range versus just one inside the top 10, I think most people would take that. And maybe that's a similar sort of sentiment for a lot of drafts, but I think especially for this draft, where at the top, even though some of these guys are really, really intriguing, it's more so the guys behind them that you feel really intrigued about, that you feel like you could almost get just as good a value at pick 25 as you can at pick 8. So I think that's going to be an interesting thing to watch with this year's draft. All right, so we learned a little bit more. Today is the day, the franchise tag deadline. We learned a little bit more about some of the running backs that are going to be available and aren't going to be available. We'll wrap up the show talking about what Washington should do to address their running back position next. Toby Altizer sitting in for Kevin Sheehan on the Team 980.
All right, happy Tuesday, everybody. We start off with the Wizards. Last night, they lost to the Rockets, but things got fiery between Jameer Watkins and Tari Eason as Eason shoved Watkins to the ground in transition. Trae Young was ejected from the contest after leaving the bench to support his teammates. Eason was also ejected for the shove. Trae Young now may face a $50,000 fine and a potential one-game suspension, putting his debut at risk versus the Jazz. Commanders, they are set to let Jake Moody walk in free agency. Now kicker atop the list for Commanders needs, plus Breece Hall was franchise tagged by the New York Jets, and the Falcons set to play in Madrid, rounding out the final host for the NFL International Contest. Tonight, we got the Wizards back in action versus the Orlando Magic. That'll be over on Bloomberg 99.1 at 6:45. Plus the Caps, they take on the Utah Mammoth live from Capital One Arena. That'll be over on 106.7 The Fan. Also at 6:45. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, and hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live every day from 10 to 1. You can catch programs like Take Command all off season. Don't forget to hit the like button whenever you do decide to join us, and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that is what's trending.
Kevin Sheehan Show. Toby Altizer filling in. Kevin will be back tomorrow at 10 a.m. Want to get to an uninspiring speech by Aaron Judge for the World Baseball Classic here in just a moment. We'll wrap up with that. But real quick, we did at least get some clarification now on which running backs will be available. The top two guys on the market being Kenneth Walker and Breece Hall. Breece Hall will not be available. He got the franchise tag from the Jets. Kenneth Walker, Super Bowl MVP, likely to be available. So that'll be something interesting. Would you want to go shopping at the top of the market and go get a Kenneth Walker, which I still think is a decent bargain because I think with how things have shifted for running backs recently, they're getting used. He's only 25 years old. They're getting used quite a bit, but you're not having to pay as much as you would for a receiver or a corner or an edge rusher. And so you can get a really good, more proven running back versus a young guy in the draft. Although you're still going to have to pay quite a bit. It's not nearly as much for other positions. So I think that's interesting. Kenneth Walker going to be available versus Breece Hall not going to be available. Again, I don't know that I'm shopping at the top of the market. I would check in on Travis Etienne. If he doesn't leave, I'm fine with going with the Rashad White, Rico Dowdle, Tyler Algier type. Back half of the top 100 free agents, according to NFL.com. I'd be more interested in those sorts of guys if you can't get a Travis Etienne, but I'll be interested. I don't see them getting in on the Kenneth Walker sweepstakes, but I think that's at least interesting that he's now going to hit the market. And I think it's probably a good thing because the more guys out there, the better chance if you're not even shopping at the top of the market, you can get one of your guys. All right, real quick before we get out of here, Aaron Judge is getting set for the World Baseball Classic. Team USA was convening, getting ready for their games, which I think get underway on Friday. I believe their schedule is Friday, they play Mexico, and then Saturday they play Great Britain or something of that nature. Let me look up the exact schedule. So it looks like Friday they play Brazil. Excuse me. They play Brazil. And then Saturday they'll play Great Britain. And then Monday they'll play Mexico. And Tuesday they play Italy. Now, I've seen a lot of people making a big stink about Paul Skeens is only going to pitch twice. Tarek Skubal is only going to pitch once. He's only going to pitch 55 pitches against Great Britain. You do have to remember this is only at max a 7-game tournament. And generally you figure you have 4 or 5 starters. So realistically, they'd only pitch once or twice. It is disappointing, but at the same point, I'm not all that mad when you consider the fact that it is a 7-game tournament. Although I'd like to see Tarek Skubal pitch in pool play and then pitch an elimination game because that's one of the superpowers of the U.S. team. I can tell you this, though. If the U.S. is dependent on a pump-up speech from their captain to win this thing, Aaron Judge, I don't feel real confident. Aaron Judge, not the most inspiring. Here was Aaron Judge addressing the team.
Sacrificing for your family at home, you're sacrificing for your country, and you're sacrificing for the brothers in the trenches with you every single day. That's one thing I want us to do, fellas. We're down, we're beat up a little bit, man. Lead into each other, man. We're going to lay it out on the line. If we do that, bring the goal home, man. I'm telling you.
Does that fire you up?
Brother.
Are you excited to go play baseball now? You want to go run through a brick wall?
Let's throw the pill.
After watching the United States win gold in men's hockey, after watching the United States win gold in women's hockey, after watching the United States win tons of golds at the Winter Olympics and hearing all the great speeches and all the great things that have come out of that, does Aaron Judge saying, let's go, man, we're going to go out there and play for each other and we're banged up. By the way, it's March. Yesterday, it was March 2nd. You haven't even played an actual game of baseball yet this year. You're only in spring training. How are you talking to you're banged up? We got to lean on each other, man. What is he talking about? Like, I appreciate that Aaron Judge is a really good baseball player. I still think Shohei's the best player in the game because he can do a little bit of both, but he's probably the best, I guess, pure hitter in the sport. Man, is he uninspiring as a leader. Man, does that not make me want to play baseball. That's not that inspiring of a speech. I appreciate him stepping up and taking the role. There are some other guys in there that could step up and take that sort of a role and inspire me a lot more. Unfortunately, there's one that used to play here that probably could step up and give a better speech in Bryce Harper. But I love the World Baseball Classic. I'm really excited to see how the U.S. does. I know it's kind of tough. This is a very interesting year where team events and country events are taking center stage, and there's 3 of them. You've got the Olympics, which just passed, World Baseball Classic about to get underway, and then the World Cup this summer. I think for a majority of people, this would be third. This is kind of a fun type of tournament, almost like the Four Nations last year, where it was fun while it's going on. People aren't necessarily going to fully remember in a couple of years what happened. Like, everyone's going to remember the United States and Canada game where the U.S. won, Rooster. Like, everyone's going to remember that game. That was awesome. I don't know that they're going to remember what happens between the United States and Great Britain on Saturday, unless Great Britain wins, which I pray does not happen. But listen to this lineup for USA Baseball. They're playing against the Giants today. This is their lineup they're trotting out. Bobby Witt Jr. at short, leading off. Batting second at first base, Bryce Harper. Batting third and right field, Aaron Judge. DH, batting cleanup, Kyle Schwarber. Batting fifth and third, Alex Bregman. Catching and batting sixth, the big dumper, Cal Raleigh. Batting seventh, playing left, Roman Anthony. Batting eighth, playing center, Byron Buxton. And then batting ninth, playing second base, Bryce Terang. Starting for the United States, Paul Skeens. What a nasty team that is.
It's not bad.
What a nasty team that is. That's part of why I enjoy these things, is it's like an all-star game where you get the best of the best. Like, you look at some of these teams, and it is unbelievable seeing the lineups that they're able to put out there. The Dominican Republic has a team that is absolutely filthy. I'm trying to find, like, they have Junior Caminero, who, if you don't know about him, you need to learn about him. Vladimir Guerrero, Manny Machado, Ketel Marte, Geraldo Perdomo, this is their outfield. Juan Soto, Julio Rodriguez, Fernando Tatis. Like, that's what makes this so fun. Regardless if it doesn't really matter or whatever, who cares? The level of baseball that's going to be played in this World Baseball Classic, I think, is going to be spectacular to watch. I think it's going to be really, really fun. So I hope the U.S. wins. It's probably not going to be on the backs of Aaron Judge pump-up speeches. It's probably not going to be him firing up the boys to go win this thing.
And if they don't win, we know exactly who to place the blame on.
Yeah, we'll blame it on the Yankee choker. That's what we'll blame it on. That's going to do it for us. Appreciate you listening in. Been a fun show. Appreciate Ryan Fowler joining the program. If you missed anything, you can always go back and check out the podcast for the Kevin Sheehan Show. For Max Behind the Scenes, I'm Toby Altizer. Kevin will be back tomorrow at 10 a.m. Rooster comes up next here on the Team 980.